Is it?
Terry.
Sorry for that.
Terry trailer.
Trailer. Fantastic. You're right. 1 or 2 minutes, Trey.
2, please.
2. Go.
Hello, commissioners. My name is Terry Trailer. I graduated from the Los Angeles Black Worker Center Ready to Work program. I showed up ready. I trained. I even applied for city jobs. But still, I am here waiting for a chance. It's been over a year watching contractors take city jobs while people from my neighborhood sit on the sidelines. It feels like the game is rigged and we'll never win. But commissioners, you have the power to change this, change the rules. We are asking you to use your charter reform process to address the Black job crisis.
Thank you so much. And then Sharon. 1 or 2 minutes, Sharon?
2 minutes.
Fantastic. After Sharon, I have, let's see, I'm gonna go for the last one here. Hudson, then Ashley, and then Elizabeth. Please queue up after Sharon here. Alrighty, 2 minutes, go.
Good afternoon, commissions. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sharon May King. I'm a state worker and also a proud member of LA Black Worker Center. The charter reform is more than just a structural change. It's a change to strengthen accountability, extend opportunity, and protect the rights of Black workers across Los Angeles. This is our moment to make sure our voices are heard, our community are respected, and people have real pathway to good careers. We deserve fairness, transparency, and a city system that truly work for us. The Los Angeles Black Workers Center is ready to lead, to advocate, and to make sure charter reform deliver the justice and equity our workers deserve. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Juanisha, Ashley, and Elizabeth. Nope. Okay, so all good for those 3. And Zion, I think I already got Katie, right? Katie already spoke, maybe she signed up twice. Yeah, I got Katie already. Zion, Nicholas, and Ariel. Nope, no Zion. Nicholas, I know Nicholas. Come on down, yes. And then Ariel. No worries, thank you for signing. Then I think it's Stanley and Adrian. Anyone there?
Yes.
Stanley and Adrian after Nick. Okay. Nick, 1 or 2 minutes.
2 minutes, you know me. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Nicholas Caputo, Executive Director of Livable Advanced LA, a nonprofit focused on working people, young people, anti-corruption reforms, and building a more walkable, functional LA in the dense neighborhoods where most of us actually live. We're compiling a 30-point charter reform cheat sheet, short, practical, cross-endorsed recommendations, which we will deliver to you before January. We also requested an opportunity to present this before the commission fully. I want to highlight several personnel and budget reforms that are in practice just as important as council expansion or police accountability, because dysfunction and corruption thrive most when invisible structures allow abuse to go undetected. First, controller modernization. You've already taken steps towards elevating the controller to CFO, which is essential, but the charter must also ensure the controller has complete audit authority over every cent the city allocates or spends, the ability to retain outside counsel when conflicts of interest arise, as well as, with concurrence from the city attorney, narrow subpoena power when audits are delayed or obstructed. That is how oversight becomes real rather than symbolic. Second, multi-year budget, a staggered 2-year budget cycle, operational budgets in 1 year, capital budgets in the next, with stabilized planning, prevent recurring annual crises, and finally give LA a fair chance of delivering major infrastructure on time. Third, personnel modification. Our civil service structure must reflect the city we are now, not the city we were decades ago. That includes faster, merit-based hiring, continuous recruitment and digital testing, leadership development that prepares internal talent to rise, critically, the ability for employees to transfer between departments without losing seniority, and sourcing labor through all local pipelines, including the vital LA Black workers represented here today, and ensuring that qualified workers, especially those historically shut out of civil service opportunity, can finally access and advance within city employment. That single reform reduces vacancies, improves retention, and strengthens departments our residents and our labor partners depend on. Lastly, we have to make it clear that when a department's actions result in litigation or settlements, those costs from their budget, not the general fund. Final, LA still lacks a long-term capital improvement plan, but that's a conversation for the Planning and Infrastructure Committee. Anyway, thank you for your time and centering this work. It is not just about the things we can visibly see every day. It's about the
Thank
invisible
you so much,
things that
Stanley.
pick
You're
us
up
up.
next.
Thank you.
Alrighty, ready when you are. After Stanley is Adrien.
Hello, commissioners. My name is Stanley. I'm a member of the Black Workers Center. Black workers, like my grandparents and my parents, helped build Los Angeles. Yet today, we remain unrepresented in the quality jobs that keep this city running. A charter written for a segregated city cannot build an equitable future. You all say that LA is for everyone. Well, it's time to start that it looks like that.
Right.
Reforming the charter is the path toward a workable workforce that reflects diversity and dignity in the dignity of LA. Our communities deserve better. Add workforce equity to the charter and end Black crisis, work crisis.
That's right. No,
Thank you, Adrien.
no, that's my
Yep,
name.
Okay, no worries. Oh, yeah. Okay, and then I think I have one more list. Is this Roy Salmon? Samaan? Roy, Samaan? Yep. Okay. Sorry. All right, that's everyone that signed up. Is there anyone else that we missed for public comment that would like to give it? Going once, going twice? Nope. All right, Madam Chair, that concludes public comment. Thank you so much.
Thank you, staff. Next, are there any neighborhood council community impact statements filed for today and would like to speak? Okay, seeing none, we will continue and move on to our main agenda for today. Staff, can you please read the agenda item into the record?
Sure. Pardon me. Thank you, Madam Chair. It's item number 1, study session, personnel and budget, comment and discussion issues related to civil service and personnel monthly year budget cycle and periodic charter review. We have presenters today, including the New York City budget with Francesco Brindisi. We have Engineers Architects Association, EAA. We have LA City Controller is coming with us. Kenneth Mejia is coming. We'll have Long Beach personnel also present. The People's Budget will present, and we'll have a presentation also on artificial intelligence. So those are all of our presentations. We're getting ready to get New York on the screen here, so bear with us for just one moment. Thank you so much.
Shit, we'll be here for days.
Alrighty, Francisco, thank you. You are, let's test your mic. 1 second.
I'll keep talking and you tell me when to stop. Can you hear me?
Okay, we should be
Can you hear
good.
me now?
Yes, perfect.
Yeah, great. Thank you for having me, and good afternoon, commissioners. I have some slides. Should I be able to share my screen?
Yeah, yes, you should be able to share your screen. You should have that.
All right, great. Let's see. Can you see the budget process in New York City?
We're all set. Yes, thank you so much.
All right. Well, I'm Francesco Brindisi. I'm Executive Deputy Controller for Budget and Finance. And you have some interesting questions that, sort of overlap with some of our budget structure. So I'm going to go and give you an overview. There are 2 foundational documents for our budget process and the standards to which we need to uphold our financial documents. First is the city charter. This is sort of the document that specifies the rhythm of the budget cycle and who has got the initiative and how that evolves. And then we have the Financial Emergency Act, because, 50 years ago we nearly went bankrupt. So this is state law that sort of sets a lot of the characteristics that you are maybe considering in this charter reform exercise that you're doing, including a balanced budget and financial plans. So these are the basic documents, and I'm going to go and talk a little bit about the fiscal framework in a little more detail. So the building blocks, it's the mayor and the mayor's office of management and budget that prepares and submits the budget and financial plans. The mayor sort of has the responsibility to execute on the budget and propose modifications. The city council reviews and hold hearings on the mayor's proposals. Eventually, towards the end of the fiscal year, they negotiate changes and then finally adopt an expense budget, a revenue budget, and a capital budget and capital plan. There are several fiscal monitors that provide independent opinions on the financial plan. There is the city controller has a role, of course, the state controller. There is a special state controller for New York City. There is an independent budget office also in the city charter. And there is a financial control board, which was created as part of the Financial Emergency Act. And I'm going to talk in a little bit more detail in a few slides. So all of these entities provide a review and monitor. So what the FEA, the Financial Emergency Act, what are the standards? First of all, we do GAAP budgeting. I don't know how many other local governments do this. But essentially, our budget is not cash, and it's, everything that we say is on an accrual basis. Particularly, what we are required to do is to balance according to GAAP principles, the current and upcoming fiscal year. On top of that, we need to provide a 4-year financial plan. So, in January, the new mayor is going to have a 5-year window where it's going to have the current fiscal year. The operating budget is going to be balanced according to GAAP. The upcoming fiscal year is going to be balanced according to GAAP, and then we have 3 out years. They don't need to be balanced, right? But they are estimates of both revenues and expenses, and these estimates need to be both reasonable and appropriate according to law. I mean, those are, they may be at times a little vague, but that's a standard that we're required to do to uphold. And we do essentially we update our budget and financial plan every quarter, and I'll give you the specific dates of the budget cycle. We can only borrow for a long term for capital projects, and we also have limits more stringent than other local governments on short-term borrowing, which we haven't done in 21 years, and we've been able to balance our budgets for 44 years now. Okay, one of the things that the Financial Emergency Act does that it's maybe of interest is that the revenues from property tax, they go into, by law, according to a formula, they go into a general debt service fund. That general debt service fund is filled up to the point that the formula requires for paying that service on GO bonds, or general obligation bonds. After that, we get our property tax in our general fund. We have other issuing entities for long-term debt that are based on personal income tax and sales tax. They both have a similar mechanism, so that we pay that service first and then we get the money in the general fund. We can only deviate from GAAP budgeting if there is a change in state law or if the Financial Control Board agrees. So we would not have been able to create a rainy day fund until the FEA, the Financial Emergency Act, was amended in 2020. Finally, the comprehensive financial report needs to be issued within 4 months from the end of the fiscal year, so at the end of October. The oversight, we have city charter entities. This is the controller. We have authority to perform audits. We need to audit at least one aspect of each agency every 4 years, so it's a pretty busy schedule. We review contracts for, fiscal appropriateness and abuse and corruption. We publish independent fiscal analysis, and of course, we publish the actual. The IBO, the Independent Budget Office, also publishes independent fiscal analysis. They are mandated by the Chartered State Controller for New York City, does the same thing, and the Financial Control Board also does the same thing. Now, the Financial Control Board does not have the power to send the city into a control period, but every year it convenes to verify that the conditions that would have otherwise started a control period are not met. There are 5 conditions. I'm not going to bore you with those, but they have to do with having a deficit in the operating budget or essentially losing access to markets. So how does the annual cycle? So we have a July 1st, June 30th fiscal year. Let's start from June 30 when the budget is adopted and there is a financial plan. In September, we publish an updated capital plan, and in November we do a small, typically technical update to the budget and financial plan. The real action comes in January and May with the preliminary budget, financial plan and capital plan, and the executive budget, financial plan and capital plan. Essentially, you should think about this as the mayor making, making more and more refined offers to the city council, right? So the preliminary budget is what the name suggests, right? The executive budget is like, the negotiating platform for the city council. And the city council throughout this process holds hearings, and then after the executive budget, starts really negotiating on specific items. And then, the budget is adopted by June 30th. Let's see. One of the first things that we do that, it's a little different from the dynamic that we have between mayor and city council, is that we, in the fall, ask community boards and borough presidents about their priorities. And those list of priorities are sort of like compiled. And to a certain extent, they may or may not be, included in either the November budget and financial plan or the preliminary budget, right? But this is a relatively minor, role from community boards and borough presidents. As I mentioned before, the action starts in January, typically, unless there's a new mayor. It's a little delayed. And the mayor presents a preliminary budget, an operating budget, and a 5-year capital commitment plan, and current and upcoming operating budget need to be balanced according to GAAP. Then we have 3 out years. So in February, when the new mayor comes in, is going to have to provide a balance FY26 and a balance FY27, and then we're going to have 28 through FY30 as part of the financial plan. At the same time, for the same years, we have the mayor is going to present the preliminary capital commitment plan. And then every numbered year, there is a 10-year capital strategy, which is essentially the 5-year capital commitment plan plus an additional 5 years in the future. After this, there is a round of hearings. All of the agencies essentially go to city council, the city controller, the independent budget office. They all testify in front of city council. And at the end of the hearings, the city council publishes a response to the mayor's preliminary budget where they outline their priorities. Throughout all of this, all of the fiscal monitors, all 4 of them, they publish independent analysis and re-estimates of the mayor's budget, right? Then the cycle starts again. the mini cycle. In May, the mayor presents an executive budget. In theory, it would take into account, things that changed between January and May, and things that the city council might have proposed in their response. And again, current and upcoming operating budget need to be balanced. 5-year financial plan, 5-year commitment plan, capital commitment plan. Another round of hearings, another set of reports and independent analysis from all of the fiscal matters. After this, there is the period of real negotiation of the budget, right, where the mayor and city council start sort of agreeing on potential changes to the revenue estimates and potential changes to the amounts that the mayor has put in the executive budget, right? And there are some rules of engagement. Once the mayor puts money in the executive budget, they cannot take it back in order to, sort of negotiate with city council. But those are finer points. In theory, by June 5th, there should be an adopted budget. It almost never happens that way. And we have until June 30th, essentially, and depending on the year and the political situation, we might get very close to the end of the fiscal year. The last vote, if the city council adopts the expense budget, the revenue budget, it determines what the property tax rates are, and then approves the capital spending for the coming year, the capital budget, plus the capital program for the horizon of the financial plan. And I understand I rushed a little bit, I hope not too much. These are conclusions. We have a highly transparent and very complex budget process. A lot of what we do is the product of being bankrupt 50 years ago. A lot of the fiscal framework comes from, the Financial Emergency Act. Despite not there being an emergency, the Financial Emergency Act is alive and well. It's going to be in place at least until 2035. And so will be the Financial Control Board. They don't have the power to reinstate the control period. For that, you need state legislation, but it's an additional check. The mayor plays a very, very strong role in the budget process, right? But it's also, faces constraints that are not common among local governments, like the gap budget balance and the multi-year planning and the external oversight. Because stuff happens all the time, it's the fact that we have quarterly updates really provide, a lot of flexibility within this relatively more stringent overall fiscal framework. I understand that you're considering going to 2-year budgets. It's something that, I'm not quite sure it would work for New York City necessarily, given how maybe big our budget is and how it evolves quickly. But, it's something that you're considering. And, gap balance budgets are hard to make, definitely harder than CAS, but a lot more rigorous. And the multi-year plans, they're important and they serve us well. As long as we keep, keep those standards of reasonable and appropriate projections, right? That is the role that the independent fiscal oversight plays, right? To make sure that there is enough publicly available documentation and re-estimates of what the mayor puts out, right? That is something that, feeds into our official statements when we sell bonds. It feeds into what the rating agencies are, considering when they rate our bonds, right? So it's all information that is out there, and it's like influential, and it has an effect for sure in keeping the estimates of the financial plan in better shape. So that's all I have on the slides. I hope that was of interest, and I'm ready here to take your questions.
Yeah, thank you, Francesco, for your presentation and the quick snapshot of New York City budget. We're just going to jump straight into questions. I see Commissioner Akili, you have a couple of questions. Go ahead.
I do, thank you. Is this working?
Can you hear us okay?
Can you
I can hear you.
Thank you, Mr. Brindisi. It was a really interesting, thorough report and very concise. Couple questions. One is very simple. For comparison, how big is this council that the mayor's negotiating with in New York?
51.
51, okay, I thought so, so that's really different. I'm pretty sure we don't want to have state oversight, which we understand why you do, historic reasons. But one thing I'm confused, I need your help, please. You use the term multi-year planning, but it also
Yes.
appears that every year you go through this complex process. And I am confused. I guess I thought that once we do, for example, I don't know if you consider yourself to do a 2-year cycle, but if we end up on a 2-year, I was assuming the second year we don't have to go through all this. There's already a budget.
Yes, no, we do everything all at once, everywhere. What's the name of that? No, we really do everything all the time, right? We update the capital commitment plan, we update all of the operating budgets and financial plans, and we do this constantly. I don't think, because I'm so steeped into this sort of framework, and that's, many years, I'm not going to say how many of my professional life, I could not conceive a 2-year budget. Right? Meaning that, you sort of like agree on what you're going to spend money on, this year and the next, right? And I think, sometimes the short-term nature and the fact that you do it quarterly and you do it often and you update all things, quarterly sort of gives the incentive of sort of recognizing some expenses or recognizing some revenues a little bit at a time, right? So here is how it typically works. You sort of underestimate expenses a little bit. And then because you underestimate expenses a little bit, then you're sort of like revenues, you're being very cautious, right? 3 months later, all of a sudden you have more revenues, and then those additional revenues are sort of, go to cover the expenses that you did not, fully realize 3 months before. And also to sort of fund some of the mayor's priorities, right? Because, this is all mayor driven until the executive budget. So from that point of view, if you have more revenues, it's unlikely, historically, it has been unlikely that the mayor is going to fund something that the council wants, right? The mayor is going to want to fund some of their priorities and then let the council sort of negotiate after the executive budget for what they might want to add to what the mayor has to want, right? So it gives a little bit of maybe some distorted incentives in that sense, right? But also, with the city has so many, the city of New York, right? Unlike the city of LA has so many responsibilities, right? It's its own school district. We have hospitals, we have city university, right? Our budget is, very big and very complex. It's sort of like, it's difficult to imagine that you're fixing it for 2 years, right? So that plays into it as well. But it would be so good. We could do expense 1 year, the operating budget 1 year and the capital budget the next.
Well, thank you. And in terms of, as you described it, this kind of ongoing, continuous process, quarterly reports, the budget. I just wonder, how big is the staff of this controller's office?
The office of the controller has several other do this, right? So the budget oversight itself, it's not a large group. It's about 23 folks. We also co-manage the municipal finance program, right? And we have central accountancy. So all these three things combined, which is most of what I do on a daily basis, it's about 100 and something people. We are custodians and investment advisors for the pension funds. So that's another like 100 and something investment and professionals and back office professionals. That's separate from what we've discussed. We have the contracts department that reviews all the contracts. We have an audit department that is supposed to audit all of the agencies, right? So I think our staff is about 650. Maybe we have some vacancies, so maybe authorized is about 700 or something like that.
Thank you. I don't know the numbers here. I suspect you do have more people in that unit.
And then Commissioner Mack here, I have a couple of questions for you. I was curious if you could walk us more into in terms of the budget process. I was curious from when the mayor first proposes it and then sends it over to council, and then when it's available to the public for viewing and for hearing. I was wondering if you share a little bit more of what typically that time frame has looked like for New York City.
It's the same day that the mayor presents the budget to the council. It's a ritual, right? So the mayor, the day of the budget presentation, sort of like speaks with the controller, speaks with the public advocate, who is another citywide elected, then speaks to the city council member, has a press conference, and at that time, everybody's got access to all the documents.
Yeah, and then at what point, how much time do they have to the budget before they have to be in that public hearing meeting? And make the
the charter date, on a normal year, not a new administration, is January 16th, and then the first hearing is late February, beginning of March. So that's the typical timeline for the preliminary budget. The executive budget is May 1st, late April or May 1st, and then the hearings conclude at the end of May.
And then there's multiple hearings.
There are one hearing. Each agency actually is asked to testify, right? So it's there are some interesting overlaps with the state budget. Right? There's also that going on at the same time. So it's sort of the executive state budget comes first, then there's a preliminary budget for the mayor, then you go and ask money from the state. Typically, and then the state budget supposed to come out April 1st, right? That sort of feeds into the city's budget by May 1st, right? So all of those there are also those updates, right? It's not a isolated sort of process.
Thank you. And then one more question for me. You mentioned that New York budget is highly transparent. I was wondering if you could share with us some of your personal, your office and overall the city best practices of public transparency and participatory tools for the public that you've seen most effective. So public engagement, what are some best practices that you have seen?
Yeah, well, when I say that it's highly transparent, I think I should put an asterisk. Like for being a budget, it's highly transparent.
Yes.
Because all of the data are available, you have all these people that opine on it, right? It is still a very, complex. And if the mayor wants to sort of be opaque about the cost of some sort of initiative, it can be spread across, different agencies, so it's difficult to reconstruct. There is often the need to have more units of appropriation that are more explanatory of what goes in, right? So there are some agencies that, for instance, have one unit of appropriation. So you get a lot of money that pays for personnel, that pays for programs, and so on and so forth. You know what's what. So the city council typically tries to, during the negotiation, tries to have these terms and conditions, right, that are sort of like stacked on top of each other, where typically the mayor agrees to be more transparent or create more units of appropriation so that it can be, it's a process, right? It's a large budget, it's many agencies, so, you're never gonna have full transparency. There are some elements of participatory budgeting for particularly the amount of capital projects that city council members are allocated towards the end of the year, right? And so, so in certain cases, that there is some sort of polling of the constituents. It's like, what are the projects that you would like to see, be realized with this money? So there is a little bit of participatory budgeting. Whether the project is actually then, comes to fruition, it's the mayor's responsibility. So, you might do all of this and then it might be delayed or whatever, might not happen. Being a fiscal monitor, I like the role that we play, right? Particularly at the controller, because we co-manage the municipal finance program with the mayor, right? So we know where to press. Not everything, but we are in a better position than others. We have the accountancy department, so we are more into the nuts and bolts rather than somebody that is more external, like the state deputy controller or the financial control board. I would not recommend anybody to read our reports unless they want to follow us. I love my reports, of course, but they're fake and for people that already know the subject matter. I know that your controller is, we met him once, and he really cares about making things more, understandable to the public, right? I think, the independent budget office is something that we have that it's a little unique. It's supposed to be some sort of CBO, federal CBO, for the local government. So everybody, council members and the public can ask questions of the independent budget office, and they, perform the analysis and then, respond to those questions. So that's, something that is, I think, quite unique about New York City, and that would be, something to consider.
Well, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you presenting today.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Alrighty, we're gonna fix or transition away from virtual. And we have Marleen and Roy here from EAA, who are gonna be our next presenters.
Yes, we are here.
No worries, no rush.
What is the format? Should we come down there?
Yeah, please come down.
Yes, please.
Where's the mouse? Nope, that's my background.
Here
Here we go. Wow, the mouse over there, it's this way.
Do we get clicker control?
Sure. Oh, we're gonna get the presentation.
It's very important.
Let's get your presentation really quick.
Changes how you do things.
That's right.
Click.
Download. Check. Shared screen. Just grab this. We're just gonna make sure we share it properly. So give us a second.
How's everyone's Wednesday going?
Beautiful.
Good. Good to hear from all of you.
Everyone's excited.
Yeah, really.
Excited. Okay. We got to.
We're so excited about charter reform.
Thank you.
Oh, yes, the official. Tell us the history of your union, please.
We will, yeah.
Slide one.
Slide one, bullet one.
Oh, good.
Yeah, we'll get right into it.
Oh, there it is. I missed it.
Oh, not all of it.
Wait a minute, I got this all backwards.
There. Yeah, I gotta be able to see this with my glasses. So many steps, sorry. Thank you for bearing with us. Where is the proper, where's slideshow? You see slideshow? Oh, up here. Oh, here, it's slideshow, there.
Yeah. Great.
Okay, and let's just make sure I don't think our presenters can see it. Oh. We'll just go.
Oh, it's not gonna go on its own though.
Don't look.
We're gonna, oh, okay. This is fun.
Usually just roll on the press and pause button.
Okay, oh, Corey, move your head. Oh, sorry. You can't see it now. This is fun. Thank you everyone for, okay. This is, sorry, I don't see it.
It's on engineering right now, so just scroll down. Down.
Oh, there it is. Thank you.
And then just press pause.
Pause.
And then just go back to it. And
Okay.
press the space bar.
Okay, perfect. So just hit space bar when you're ready. Okay.
And how did you go back with it? Background?
Yep.
Background, just in case?
Yes. Okay, go for it.
All right.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Samaan. I'm the president of the Engineers and Architects Association. Tap it.
Oh, tap on the top.
On the
Space bar.
Space.
Oh, no, but this?
Oh, yeah, don't, sorry.
That's right. Good.
And I'm Marleen Fonseca, Executive
Got it.
Director of EAA.
So I've been a city planner with the City of Los Angeles for just a little over 7 years, but I also serve as the president of our union board. And so we are the Engineers and Architects Association. We were established in 1894, as you can see there on our seal. We are probably one of the oldest continuously operating independent city employed public sector unions in Los Angeles. So a little bit about us. We represent 6,000 city employees, over 200 classifications in every department. I like to say from airport to zoo, there are EAA members. These members are analysts. They are in the IT departments of these departments, city planners, accountants, auditors, transportation analysts, and managers. Just to give you a flavor of some of the work that we do, that our members work on, they work on transportation and mobility plans like Vision Zero. They develop long-range community plans for the city planning department. There are 35 of those across the city that are in basically constant stages of being upgraded and maintained. We also run workforce centers through EWDD. We also work with the community on arts projects and community murals through the Cultural Affairs Department. And we also ensure that neighborhood councils are compliant and functional through the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment. And that's just a sample. We've got, as I said, members all over the city of Los Angeles doing a number of tasks. So I'll turn it over to Marleen now too.
I do just want to quickly state that anything that impacts city employees and or their working conditions does require the meet and confer process. And I think we've said that before.
Just saying.
We have not heard yet from the personnel department as to what they're going to be proposing for changes in the charter. We are open to any changes that improve hiring. But again, impacts to the employees, our members, is going to be one of our top priorities, if not the top priority. This presentation is going to focus on Article 10 of the city charter.
Sorry.
We'll focus on Article 10 of the city charter. There's going to be some things that you see we don't want to budge on, but for others, we're open, right? We need to have the discussions. We want to hear from personnel. We want to hear what they want to change. We want to hear their rationale for that change. And we'll go back, we'll do our research, we'll talk to our members, get their input, and then we'll take a position. Our goal is to ensure that our members who are impacted the most by Article 10, we want to make sure that their voices are heard throughout their process, and that's going to be our goal.
I'll just state for our last statement where we won't budge is the removal of Article 10, the employment article from the charter altogether. That's somewhere that as of right now, we don't expect to change and we do not want that removed from the charter. All right. Slide 2. Oh. Okay. Oh, okay. So we just kind of wanted to recap really quickly some of your prior presentations. You have heard from the personnel department, Ms. Malika Billups. She focused mostly on hiring, the need for flexibility, efficiency, and speed. She did end her presentation by stating there were a few trigger words, and that is what she called them, where she will be looking for recommendations. Those were emergency appointments, exempt positions, and promotions. So we are going to kind of focus on that. You also heard from our union siblings from Ask Me, and they stated, hey, we already have creative pathways that work around the charter. Maybe the charter's not the problem. They talked about their targeted local hire. They brought up Bridge to Jobs, which is another pathway, alternative pathway, and that's for EAA positions. And they stated that it's very important that employment protections remain in the charter. So EAA did, again, wanting to hear directly from our members because they're the most impacted. We did a survey of our members. We have 6,000 members, and we asked them questions about their hiring experiences with the promotion, exams, probationary periods. We asked them about the rules, like 3 whole scores. And we got 500 respondents, and all the answers were pretty consistent, which we'll go over now.
So, thank you. So as Marleen said, we surveyed our members, and it turns out we agree with them. They believe, and we agree, that Article 10 should not be removed from the city charter. However, there may be need for updates, not removal, but there may be, as you all know very well, the charter hasn't been comprehensively looked at in quite some time, so we're open to changes and amendments to that article, but we want it to remain in the charter. We agree that the hiring process needs modernization, particularly around exams and testing procedures. We believe they take too long. They're outdated. However, we aren't convinced that Article 10 is the obstacle to that. There are other locations, and we'll get into that, where testing provisions are sort of explained, and so we believe that might be a more fruitful place for exploring how to update and modernize the testing procedures. We do need to re-examine the testing process and what merit-based hiring means in today's terms, especially for promotions and for specialized positions. But hiring must remain transparent and fair. So we're not trying to, pull away from that commitment to transparency and fairness in the hiring process particularly for civil service. And finally, we're looking for language to support new and improve current pathways, such as Bridge to Jobs, and to create promotional opportunities for long-term exempt employees.
And we will get into what an exempt employee is in future slides, but keep it moving. We want to talk a little bit about the current civil service hiring and promotional process. This process is governed by a few documents, like Roy mentioned. Number one, why we're all here, for the charter, right? The charter contains Article 10, which is the employment section of the charter. And that establishes a civil service commission as well as civil service rules. So the civil service rules is another document that does not live inside the charter. It's outside of the charter, and it contains the rules about hiring, testing, examining, promoting, etc., based on what the charter says it needs to follow. And there's also personnel policies that govern this. So there's 3 documents. But for today's purposes, let's see, Roy, you could talk about Article 10 of the charter.
So Article 10 does ensure that hiring is based on merit, not favoritism. We certainly don't want to introduce that as an option in our hiring practices. We like merit-based hiring. Article 10 also guarantees fair, open, and equal access to city employment. Again, we strongly reaffirm the need to maintain that as a bedrock of what we're trying to do going forward. It also provides safeguards for consistent and equitable personnel policies and practices, and provides due process for disciplinary matters. These are bread and butter labor issues, and we want them to remain locked into the charter because we believe that's the safest place to keep them. If we really care about keeping favoritism and rapid changes out of the process, then the charter is the place to do it, because as you all know, changing the charter is really hard, and it should be hard to change how hiring is done.
That being said, again, we're not saying the charter should not be changed, but we do want to be very careful and selective about what needs to be changed in there, and maybe some tweaks to words and or defining words might help. But just to familiarize you a little bit, what the charter mandates versus what the civil service rules mandate. Again, the civil service rules can be changed by the commission, by the vote of the Civil Service Commission. So the charter requires a competitive exam. These are exact words from the charter, right? A competitive exam. It says that an eligible list must be created and the 3-hole score rule must be used to hire from that list. I'm going to explain that in the next slide. It sets probationary periods at up to 12 months. And it establishes, this one is not in Article 10, but it is in the charter. It establishes the Board of Civil Service Commissioners. It states that they are appointed by the mayor. And it gives them the power and the duty to make and enforce the civil service rules and to establish and maintain the civil service system in accordance with Article 10 of the Charter. Then we got the civil service rules that kind of breaks it down a little more. Civil service rules define exam, and it says that an exam is a test or combination of tests which determine the relative capacity of candidates for the class in which they are seeking appointment, right? Merit-based. It further defines test as one of the parts of an exam, such as a written test, performance test, or evaluation of general qualifications. It also defines what each of those are. I just kind of want to focus a little on that, or evaluation of general qualifications. That already offers some great flexibility from a typical exam. And we do see recently, in the more recent, that the city is using that for more specialized positions. For example, if you're an accountant, you go to school for 4 years and get an accounting degree, haven't you shown that that's by merit you're qualified for the job? Because remember, the system was developed to make sure that unqualified candidates stay out of city employment, right? Avoiding nepotism and favoritism, qualified candidates. So I think that's what we mean when we say it's time to rethink about what merit-based means nowadays. And for the next slide, I just kind of want to take you through a typical hiring experience so that you better understand. So you have somebody who submits an application, and about 3 to 4 months later, they're going to take a multiple choice exam. Now, this is the most common way. Again, like we said, the city's already kind of venturing out. But most typically, the application submitted, 3 to 4 months later, you're taking a multiple choice exam. About 6 months after you've submitted your application, if you pass the exam, you'll take a panel interview usually. This is about 3 employees who sit on a panel and ask you questions. They might be city employees, they might be county employees that are counterparts to the classification being hired. And then you receive a score, you get placed on a list by ranking, and that's after about 9 months of starting the process. And the job bulletin determines the scoring method. So it might say you're going to take a multiple choice exam and an interview, but the multiple choice exam, all you got to do is pass it. It qualifies you with 70%, and then the interview is 100% of your score. Or it might be 50-50. It might be 50% of the multiple choice and 50% of the interview. That's dictated by the bulletin, not the charter. Then you get on an eligible list, which I mentioned in the prior slide. That's good for 2 years. So you could be hired anywhere from 9 months to 3 years after you've submitted an application. The departments, now when they're ready to hire, they're going to certify the list from personnel department. So they tell the personnel that they want to hire this class. Personnel will pull the list for them, but they'll only provide them the names that are reachable. And what that means, going back to the charter, is they're going to look at the rule of 3 whole scores. So let's say it's a brand new list. People got 100, people got 99, people got 98. As a department wants to hire one accountant, they got to interview everybody who got 100, or they got to offer an interview to everyone who got 100 and 99 and a 98, however many employees that is. And they got to interview from whoever shows up from those contacts and select from there. They can't select from farther down on the list. They can only select who's reachable. So this is some of the flexibility that I believe Ms. Billups was talking about wanting, and managers wanting to be able, especially in promotions, to maybe pull down from a candidate who didn't score as high. And we'll talk about the problems of the exams and why people might not be scoring as high as they should. But anyhow, after that, they do a 6-month probation usually, and then they obtain civil service status. I'm just pointing out what the GM did state. The charter rules create rigidity and we can't change our process. Again, open to discussion, but we just don't see it yet. So curious to hear where they believe that the rigidity is, and we will work on that with them. So we are committed to that. Alrighty, Roy's gonna tell us a little bit. We're gonna focus on exempt employees and emergency appointments because Ms. Phillips did state that they were gonna look in these areas for flexibility.
So thanks, Marleen. So I'll be playing good cop, the black bullet points. I'll be reading the great parts about exempt and emergency employees. So this is exempt employees are covered in section 10.01. No civil service status, no exam. So that means hiring is quick. Hiring can be completed in the time it takes HR and Workday, which is, I'm sure you've all heard of Workday, but that is our HR and hiring software. As quick as you can get someone into the system, give them an employee ID and a badge. You don't even need a badge, just get that ID. You can be in the door and working. There's no limit on the duration of an exempt employee. However, the charter does limit to 150 positions. Council can increase that. And the goal or the purpose of that is to render professional, scientific, or expert services. And per the Personnel General Manager, per Ms. Phillips, exemptions can be somewhat controversial. They're the exceptions to the rule. They don't want to have to establish their quote-unquote merit in a public sense. However, general managers, of course, do want more flexibility. So there's a little bit of a push and pull there.
And if I could cover what we're going to be watching for in the red. So this is what the union is going to be looking out for, and we want to share it with you in the hopes that you also are aware of this and look out for it. These employees have no protection. So if the city is thinking about increasing or using these more, these employees have no protection. They could be fired anytime at will for no cause and no warning. They're the first to be laid off. As you all know, we had a budget crisis in these last few months, and some of our members did receive layoff notices and were actually sent home. We brought them back. We did save their jobs and bring them back, but they were sent home. And the ones that were sent home were the exempt employees. And it didn't matter how long, number of years they had. Ours had anywhere from 10 years to 29 years on the job. They were running programs that were, very important programs in the city, such as out of the Department of Disability and out of the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment. And they had extensive knowledge on the job, right? But they're the first to go because they're exempt. They have no status. There's no pathways for them, which is a shame. They don't qualify for promotional exams. So it doesn't matter how hard you work. You've been there 10 years. You know everything about every city department. You can't take a promotional exam because you're not a civil servant. Also, this does open the door for the potential of all the isms, the words that we don't like to use, right? Nepotism, favoritism, and it does open the potential for hiring unqualified candidates. Emergency appointments, so slightly similar but different.
So this is covered by section 10.13. No civil service status, no exam, quick hiring. They're intended to prevent stoppage of public business or address extraordinary. It's a serious situation when you got to get those emergency appointments in there. I would recommend not having those two words next to each other in the charter. If you could just, that was you. Well, we'll talk about that later. Setting me up. So they don't need to meet the requirements for the job at the time of hiring, and charter limits these to 1 year. However, and they must terminate when a regular appointment can be made from an eligible civil service list. So they're very much stopgap. Once you can get through and get that eligible list up and running and go through the normal hiring process, those emergency appointments are gone.
Unless they're reachable. If they're not reachable, they're gone, right? But you've had them for at least a year, sometimes longer, because sometimes there is one extension. You've trained them, you've spent money on them, and now they're not reachable. And even though they might be reachable within the 2 years, they gotta go home. They're being terminated. And we've had this happen, and our members will call us, I'm being terminated, but I'm almost reachable. Well, the rules are the rules, and they don't want to come back after it. They're like, I'm not coming back. Why would I come back to an employer who doesn't take my actual, what I've shown is my merit, and consider it? But again, we got to explain the rules are the rules. So what are our concerns here? There's no process requirements for hiring emergency appointments. When we know about it, we'll come to the department and say, you got to advertise, you got to do it fair. And that's for entry level or promotion. So the concern is also with promotions. If there's a vacancy, you got 5 people in the subordinate class, You don't have to advertise that you're gonna fill an emergency appointment. You don't have to interview. You could just say to one of your 5 subordinates, I'm gonna give you this emergency appointment. Well, that gives them a leg up, right? Now they have an advantage. And it's not fair. We like to see rotations, but there's nothing that says they have to do that. For promotional vacancies, this can lead to predeterminations, unfair advantages. If lists are not established within that 1-year time frame, which I've also seen happen, the employees are discharged. Again, no fault of the employee, no fault of the department even. The department saying, we want to keep them, please help us, call personnel. And personnel saying, civil service rules are the rules, right? We covered if employees aren't reachable, they must be terminated. Also, you run the risk of emergency appointments not passing that exam, because we'll get into the problems with the exam that comes straight from our survey, right?
So I can get into some of those results. And look, I've lived that experience. I'm a civil service employee, been with the city for 7 years. That exam process is brutal. You're waiting. There's not a lot of communication back to our folks. But now let's get into some of the direct experiences that our members have shared. A member from the ITA department, a large portion of the exam material was irrelevant to the actual position or extremely outdated. Some of the questions are 10 years out of date and not applicable to the technology being used in the departments. Now, the speed of IT obviously is breakneck, and so if these exams are not being regularly updated, why are we testing for skills that are 10 years out of date and prioritizing hiring those people? Doesn't make sense.
And how merit-based is that?
And how merit-based is that, right? An accountant reported the test was not relevant to real tasks that I need to perform. Someone from our analyst series, so analysts are found in every department all over the city. The multiple choice exams are really multiple guess exams. It does not prove what type of employee you will be, but rather that you are good at taking these types of tests. Another analyst reported the amount of long division and fraction questions on the exam is ridiculous. I have never been asked or expected to do that kind of math without a calculator in my career, and I have a hard time imagining a scenario where anyone would need to. As an Excel-based professional myself, yeah, listen, we're not mentally crunching through long division to figure out what the department's multi-million-dollar budget needs to be at the end of the year. We're beyond that. Finally, one of our photographers noted only 10 out of the 75 questions were on photography. Photography is a practical, creative skill, not a memorization test. Some of the questions dealt with darkroom photography, which is not even applicable. Now, our photographers, some of them do take really nice pictures of puppies being adopted and so forth.
Like 3 of them.
Certifications. Most of our photographers are in the police department. They are taking crime scene photographs. This is not Dexter. They're not developing these things and hanging them up in a dark room. These are digital. They're being called out at all times of day or night, and they're going out and doing their jobs. Why are we testing them on dark rooms? Why are we not asking them about their photography skills? Why is that the test?
And I will point out that I know who this photographer is. I know when they didn't pass the exam, they were an emergency appointment. He was a Pulitzer Prize winning photographer, actually. This is a very hard position to fill because, like Roy said, people think, oh, I'm gonna go take photos of. I even see when they advertise the exam as like turtles in a pond or something. Sure. But it's really mostly crime scene photos, 24/7. You're getting called out. You're going into dirty, nasty, smelly crime scenes. It's not fun. So just to point out what is important here. Now this is really relevant to entrance exams. These were quotes from the entrance exams, entry level, not promotions. But civil service tests, just as a reminder, were implemented pre-1900. To ensure qualified candidates. But at that time, there were no professional degrees. There was no degrees in modern fields such as engineering, IT, urban planning, finance, environmental science, etc. Right? Civil service exams were designed for a different era. Today's rigid multiple choice exams don't match modern job complexities. But again, it begs the question, at least for us, does the charter create the barrier or is it the examining process? That's what we're going to be looking at throughout when we're at the table with the city. And now we'll just point out a few of the concerns from the promotional exams.
Right, so we'll get into that as well, because once you're in the door, there's still whole pathways ahead of you in terms of your career with the civil service. So, some things that came out of our survey, that it's more important that the city test to determine if the person taking a promotional test knows how to research and where to find information requested versus knowing the exact answer of very detailed, obscure questions. So again, are we testing to test, or are we testing to find skills that are going to make sure that the candidate is successful in their new role? Because again, for some of our job classifications, they could be transferred to any department in the city, like an analyst or an accountant, for example. You can be moved around the city. So you might know the code that is, let's say, relevant to the planning department front to back, but once you're moved to a new department, the real skill is how quickly can you get up and running? Can we ensure that the interviewers are aware of what the city departments actually do? And Marleen spoke to the composition of some of these panels, where they may not even be from the departments that are doing the hiring. They may be outside experts, which is not to knock the expertise of those experts, but it's just to say that our jobs are very highly specialized, especially in the promotional setting. Are we establishing alternate routes for promoting? Not everyone is good at taking tests, but some people are very good at their jobs. Can we make it more about actual experience and ability to do the job instead of a test with city info that can be found online if needed? So again, not testing based on the reality of what the day-to-day job is going to look like. It needs to be completely revamped. Merit and experience-based promotions are much needed. These are not some outdated arbitrary exams. So again, we're getting to the exams. And finally, promotion should be more on merit, not just on testing capabilities. And this theme kept coming up over and over again. If an employee is currently in a bridge class, they should be able to become permanent after performing the job for 5 years and if recommended by the department head without an exam. So, and I think we heard from the Black Worker Center as well in terms of getting your foot in the door and how important that is in terms of getting these civil service jobs. Well, we're not really setting people up to succeed if we're not providing a pathway for someone to do well and stay in that job and move up that job chain once they're in the door.
And I will say about our Bridge to Jobs class, they do have 5 years to meet the qualifications of the job, which are usually a college degree. So they're on the job for 5 whole years. They're doing great at the job. They're trained. They've used city resources, have been used to train them. They're going to school. They get their degree, and then they still have this arbitrary exam, and they can't pass it, right? So, and again, this is just for promotion. We are thinking, and I'm going to keep reiterating that we haven't sat down with personnel yet, and this should have started long ago, right? I think. So we're just kind of thinking what might be said at the table. What are we going to be looking at? Should we reconsider the testing process for promotions? Should the requirement for an eligible list and 3 whole scores be used for promotions? Should testing for bridge to job pathways be removed, right? Isn't the 5-year the testing period? Can we see about that happening? Also, we're open to changes, but any changes that we agree to are gonna have to decrease the possibility of favoritism in the promotional selections, because that is another common concern that we hear from people already with their 3 whole scores. Well, I scored higher, I'm a great employee, but they chose somebody way under, who scored way under me. If we expand that to 5 whole scores, it's gonna be even more flexible for the GMs to do that. We're not saying we're opposed to it, we're just saying we need some safeguards in place to ensure. And to end, we just wanna end with some keynotes and takeaways.
Sure, so I can kick that off. So, we believe that we need to rethink the concept of what merit-based testing looks like, especially for promotions and jobs that require specialized degrees. We believe that employee protections and due process provisions in Article 10 should not be touched. And we're open to modernization and more efficient and faster testing, but we're not confident the charter is necessarily the issue in this regard.
We're interested in exploring the possibility of reconsidering the promotional testing process. When you have discussions, you hear pros and cons. So I'm not trying to say this is our proposal and there may be some unintended consequences that I'm not aware of, but we want to explore that. We have concerns about expanding the use of exempt employees or emergency appointments for all the reasons we stated in those red bullet points. We agree that the 3 whole scores might limit the GM's hiring flexibility, but there needs to be robust discussions and are imperative before changes are considered, because pros and cons do exist. Well, go ahead, Ryan.
Yep. So we'll favor language or recommendations that support equitable pathways. That is something that is very important to our union. We will advocate for exempt employees to have promotional opportunities after some number of years of service. And we don't believe that there should be an increase to probationary periods unless it's in lieu of the typical exam and mandatory evaluations that are required during probation. Excuse me.
If I could touch on that, Roy, there was one of the questions asked of us by personnel on what is our opinion about expanding the probationary period to 12 months. And the concern is that right now at 6 months, there's no requirements. They don't ever have to, it says they should meet with the employee at 2 months and 5 months, give them an eval for that time, but it's not required. So I've had members that are on their last day of probation, they're at home on their regular day off, they get a knock on the door and they're handed their probationary termination without ever having been met with. And so that's not okay with us, so we're gonna look for safeguards there. Again, to the bridge to jobs, we're gonna be exploring whether or not they should be testing after 5 years. And something we really didn't talk about, and it's not in Article 10, but you'll see it in bold because we think it's important if we want to look at equity and decisions on hiring and due process. The Civil Service Commission should have at least one labor appointee on the board.
Put someone on that commission that's actually had to live through and go through this process.
So that's something we'll be bringing up at the table as well. And with that is the conclusion of our presentation.
That's it. Thank you. So questions, any Q&A or?
Yeah, we'll start with Q&A. Commissioner Field?
Thank you. This is very, very useful. Thank you. I have quite a few questions.
Okay.
First, I'm curious, is your union a member of the Coalition of City Unions?
No.
Oh, you're separate?
Yes.
Okay, I want to clarify because we had a presentation from them.
Yes.
And upon my question, I'm pretty sure the lady said they want zero change.
Yeah, I did watch that. I mean,
Yeah, it's okay.
I heard your question.
I appreciate that you have a slightly more, a different approach, and you are truly interested in positive change. And I just want to verify that a number of times in your presentation, it sounds like you're still struggling with what is charter versus administrative code versus civil service. You don't actually have that 100% figured out?
No, I wouldn't say we're struggling with that. I believe we have it figured out, but we are not confident that the language in the charter is creating the barrier. It seems like the civil service rules are.
Okay. And that's something, by the way, you can imagine for us is critical.
Yes.
If it's not something that is embedded in the charter and needs change there, we want to figure out how to support the change if indeed the entire commission supports that particular change. I'm speaking only for myself, obviously. I heard things in your presentation which are, makes a lot of sense, transparent and fair hiring and so on. Earlier today, I don't know if you were here, we heard a number of speakers from the Black Workers Center saying, I think, at least partially, they don't think it is right now. And they were, mentioned repeatedly the phrase, equitable hiring and so on. Are you connected with that group? Are you aware of their concerns about the opportunities, particularly for Black Angelenos?
Yes, I'm aware. I've met with them. I've attended meetings with them. I would like to see some pathways created. Even when we talk about targeted local hire. Even when we Even when we talk about targeted local hire, there seems to be like a wall. Not there seems to be, there is a wall. They don't ever get into our positions, right? Yeah. And when the Black Workers Center had a program at the city, and I'm not sure that they still do or not, the workplace equity, no. When they had that, I kept saying, look, city needs accountants. Why don't we work together? Maybe the union can help get these folks through the schooling they need to get them into the accounting positions as well. And the city was like, no, those positions aren't really like meant for that. So like, to me, it seems like, why are you putting a wall? If we're gonna create equity, let's like create pathways all the way up.
And if I could add, I mean, the least, so when I was applying, the fact that I was applying to work for the city while I was already employed was the only reason I could wait it out for that process, right? If you're looking for a job and you need a job immediately, and then you've got to wait for, I mean, we kind of had that timeline on one of our slides of you submit your application and then you wait to hear back, and then you take a test and you wait to hear back, and then you do an interview, and then you get on a list, and what does that list even mean? Am I going to get hired? And you kind of go through all of these hurdles, and maybe in a year and a half or 2 years, if things move very smoothly, if you hit every target along the way, it's very high stakes, then you can get in the door and then you're in the city. If I wasn't working while I was applying and waiting for that job, there was no way I could have waited that out. And if you are in a position where you need to be working and you need to have a job, you can't. I mean, how does somebody wait for that long without work? You can't do it.
No, I mean, I'm gonna say again, speaking as an individual, the wait time alone is unacceptable. It's gotta be fixed, whatever part of this is, the charter, the civil servant, whatever it is. And a lot of what you've talked about the testing and how outmoded it is, all of that, we gotta figure it out. So speaking of all those things, if I remember right, General Manager Billups told us a few months ago that she, after giving us a sort of generic presentation, she would bring back very specific suggestions, which I personally hope and assume doesn't mean obliterating Section 10, Article 10. I can't even imagine that. I think, personally, it seems like that would be off the table. Changes and improvements, I'm all for. So I just wonder, it sounds like you do meet with her occasionally. I have a couple questions about that part of this. First of all, we have not seen or heard from any member of the commission, the Civil Service Commission or the Personnel Commission. Are those two different things? Same, okay. Thank you, because I wasn't sure. Can we safely assume that if she presents to us that she represents the views of the current commission?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if she's meeting with them and getting their views, right? So.
Okay. I mean, and I don't want to put you on the spot. I guess I'm just saying, do we need to have an actual member of that commission come to our committee and hear directly their perspective? I just don't know. I mean, you don't have to answer. I'm throwing it out. Sure. Our staff should be listening, because I think we need to make sure that we know what the current commission perception is. I can't imagine them thinking that it's all okay the way it is, but okay. But back to Ms. Billups. I don't know, and you probably don't either, and I don't know if our staff does, when she's actually coming back with this, you know, sort of, she said she'd be very specific about section 10 point this and 10 point that. Did you say that at that point, when you know more about her specifics, you're gonna go back and talk again with her? I mean, I just want to get a sense of the process, because we are on such a tight timeline.
Yes.
Well, the process would usually go, you know, we haven't seen her proposals either.
Right.
She did tell myself and one other labor person, you know, one-on-one, that we would see the proposals before she comes back, so.
Oh, okay.
But we haven't seen them yet. I did ask her about 3 weeks ago. I said, did I miss the email? She said, no, I haven't sent them, so.
Well, thank you. That's very reassuring to me, and I assume it will be the same for this coalition that you're not part of. I mean, all of the labor representatives will see it before we do, so that we don't waste our time.
I think there's questions about that, though. Will it be like we're done negotiating and we agree with her recommendations, or is she gonna come back with her recommendations prior to us being finished with the discussions? I don't know.
And speaking of that, I'm sorry, Chair.
But if that's the case, we'll be here public commenting to let you know.
Yeah, we'll be back.
I'm sure you will. But speaking of that, actually, you started with meet and confer.
Yeah.
I have my own background in all of this stuff. And at what stage would you perceive that happening? In other words, we have to turn in recommendations sometime in mid-March, roughly. I don't remember exactly. Do you meet and confer after our commission, or hopefully in advance? I mean, do you have any idea?
It seems like nobody really can answer that question. In my mind, it would have to be before, because once you all adopt some recommendations to go to the ballot, how do you change that? If people approve it, we can't meet and confer after and change the vote of the constituents.
Well, just for clarity, we have been told, I believe it's accurate, we don't send direct to the ballot. The council has the final say. So you got a lot of bargaining space, if I may say.
Sure.
I mean, when this first came out, what was it, a year ago? They tried to get on the 24 ballot, right? So 2 years ago?
Well, some of it went on the 24, but we're supposed to clean it up, right?
Sure. So we put in the demand to meet and confer back then. So I would have loved to have started before you all started meeting even.
Thank you. I appreciate your time and your clear presentation.
And then I just have a quick, couple of questions. I feel like Commissioner Theo kind of covered the questions I have, but really quick ones. Wanted to hear a little bit more about the Bridge to Jobs pathway. I haven't heard of it too much about it before, but I was curious what type of jobs within the cities is embedded in that pathway. Is it like specific areas or is it just across?
The most recent one was the accountant, I think because of the need for accountants. So what they do is they create lower positions as trainee and assistant. And it's similar to TLH. They move through those levels after a certain amount of time, but they do still have to acquire the degree and pass the exam at the end, which is different than TLH. Their probationary period is like their exam.
And for those who pass the exam, do they typically pipeline into the jobs that they do the classes in, or is it like a completely new, like?
You know, it's so new. I mean, it's been around, but there's not a whole lot of positions they use, and I don't really have a lot of contact with those members. I meet with personnel, and they explain the pathway before they hire. But offhand, I don't want to give you incorrect answers.
That's fair. No, I'm just trying to kind of gauge kind of how the pipeline works. And
they have a trainee, they move into an assistant after a certain amount of time, and then they got to take the exam to move into the actual job.
Yeah, okay. And then last question was curious if there is a model from a different city in terms of their hiring process that you are aware of and curious of, or maybe we should look into. We're talking to Long Beach later today, but curious if you have you've done your research and if you have any recommendations.
Right.
No. Short answer, no, we haven't looked into that. I mean, what we'd like to see is actually, we have seen when departments need to move quickly, that the process can be shortened, our existing process, because so much of it is sort of, how do I put this? It is sort of decided in consultation between management of a department and the personnel department, that when there is need, we can hustle and get people in the door when we need to by eliminating multiple choice exams, agreeing to use the interview as the full 100%, so we don't have to wait for the score to come back and to be validated and all that. If we just say, okay, we're going to do an interview and we'll let the probation process do its job and sort out the quality of who we get in the door. So we do have an existing model that can work, and it's really more about motivating the folks that are in those positions right now to agree that there is an urgent need to get more people in the door, and so we're going to agree to shorten our own process. Because it's sort of, we're setting up the rules on ourselves. Yeah. It's us, it's our rules that are doing this. It's not necessarily the charter, it's just a department saying, I want this exam, these questions, I want this type of written thing, I want these many in-person interviews, and that's coming from departments. And so that really just needs the leadership of, I don't know if that's the personnel department, the mayor, whoever, I'm not gonna tell the city how to do that, but that there could be some motivation to really focus on getting people in the door, and that we can use our existing procedures, just the shorter version of what we've already got to get it done.
Yeah, so I haven't really done the research either. We have done research in other cities for other things like telecommuting and contracts, obviously. And this is on our list, but I haven't gotten to that yet.
Okay, no, just helpful. Well, thank you so much for presenting.
Yeah, thank you both. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Your forum is leaving.
If you want to give us 30, I think a minute, we've got an additional member who's walking in just 2 seconds, so we can keep
Oh,
form.
you're saying James is almost.
Yes, James is almost
All
here.
right, I'll sit tight.
Okay,
Not for
fantastic.
another
And we'll queue up our next presenter and get his presentation. Bryce Tyler from the great city of Long Beach is here.
hour. Oh, good.
I always get the personal privilege to introduce anyone from my hometown of Long Beach, so happy to have another Long Beach representative to talk about how a city does things differently. We're going to get your presentation ready. Give us 2 shakes. Right there.
We don't need a forum for him to figure out the technology. I'll be back.
We need form.
But I mean, I'm just gonna go to I'll be right back.
Okay.
Yeah, by the time you get
Okay,
it
why
set
don't
up.
you recess this?
By the time you get it set up.
You just recess it.
quick announcement, we're gonna take a 5-minute recess.
Ross, I didn't see you.
Oh, I was talking about like 20 minutes in.
Chair of this committee is present. Commissioner Field is, she stepped out, will be coming back. Commissioner Thomas?
Present.
All right, we have quorum.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Madam Chair. And we come back now to the City of Long Beach. Mr. Bryce Tyler is here to present on behalf of the city and talk about Long Beach a bit. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Justin. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you all are doing well. Again, my name is Bryce Tyler. I am the Director of Human Resources for the City of Long Beach. I'm going to just do a quick overview and then just kind of jump through the slides, and then we'll be able to open up for Q&A. So one of the things I wanted to start with is just, we're going to provide a brief presentation on the City of Long Beach's Charter Amendment, which was passed the ballot last December, or certified last December, and fully implemented this May of 2025. Our charter amendment on the ballot was known as Measure JB. So during this presentation, I'll provide that recap, some of the details regarding the meet and confer process with our labor unions, as well as an update on where we are approximately 6 months post-integration. But before I begin, I want to take a moment just to recognize a few members of my team who are here in attendance. First, I'd like to just shout out and introduce Yesenia Rico, who is our Bureau Manager over Talent Management. Salvador Barajas, who is one of our HR officers over Talent Management, as well as Peter Boo, who is also an HR officer. So thank them for being here with supporting me in this presentation. A little bit about myself. I've been with the city for a little over 9 months now. Prior to joining the city team, I spent about 19 years with the County of Los Angeles, working in various departments, most recently with the Internal Services Department. And I also spent about 9 months consulting for the city of Huntington Park. So if we go to the next slide.
We just lost it. Give us a
No problem, no
second.
problem.
This was bound to happen.
Technology always finds a way to join presentations, so appreciate technology for showing up.
Let's see. Nope. That one. Nope. Don't want that. Presenting mode, slideshow. Okay, let's make sure it's on Zoom. We're set? Okay. Okay.
Awesome. So a quick overview of our charter amendment. So what was proposed? Consolidation of our previous civil service department and human resources departments into one unified hiring department operated within the Department of Human Resources and reporting to the city manager to manage all employee recruitments, hiring, and classified employee certifications. Also, the amendment aimed to establish an independent civil service employee rights and appeals commission to resolve complaints regarding civil service rules, adjudicate classified employee disciplinary appeals, and to receive complaints from applicants regarding any step of the classified hiring process, as well as elimination of the Civil Service Commission due to the forming of the new commission. And also implementation of new local hiring preferences for Long Beach residents, students from local colleges and universities, current non-career city employees, and candidates who have participated in internships and apprenticeship programs relevant to the position they are applying for. So if we go to the next slide. This is a little bit of just a recap, again, of how this started and where we ended. So during the 2024 State of the City address, Our Mayor, Rex Richardson, proposed a charter amendment to reform and streamline the civil service hiring processes with the goal of reducing the length of time from application to offer, job offer, to 90 business days. Offering temporary or more stability by giving a greater employees path towards permanent city jobs, and placing a greater focus on implementing local hiring preferences for the residents. Prior to charter amendment, the city's recruitment process was bifurcated between the two departments. So the Civil Service Department was responsible for all classified recruitments, while the Human Resources Department was responsible for the unclassified recruitments. As you might imagine, this created a lot of confusion for candidates. Also, it saw where our vacancy rates were over 20%. I believe we were over 22%, with specific departments having higher vacancy rates. The city was unique because we were one of the only large municipalities with that bifurcated structure. And the goal of the charter amendment was to modernize and bring everything under one roof. So the overall timelines for classified recruitments had not been improved despite several years of increased funding and attempts at improving the process. The proposal for the charter amendment was presented to each of the charter commissions, including 2 presentations to the Civil Service Commission, and was revised and strengthened through the meet and confer process. Next slide. So this is just a visual timeline of the key dates for the charter amendment process. As you can see on the slides, there was a portion that's highlighted as an interim period. The interim period essentially was just aimed at making sure that the normal operations could continue during the charter amendment process. This ensured that there was no lack in terms of recruitments that were still ongoing, candidates not being able to be tested and hired, and just also ensured just continuity within the departmental structure. Next slide, please. So additionally, during that period, all of the current, civil service rules and regulations would remain intact. Nothing would be changed. However, once the election results were certified, the Human Resources Department assumed strategic management oversight, while the Civil Service Department continued and managing the day-to-day operations. Let's see. Yeah, next slide, please. So the Human Resources Department initiated the required meet and confer process with the city's 11 labor associations to address proposed charter amendments in January of 2024. Through the meet and confer process, the proposed charter amendment was revised and strengthened as a result of feedback from various labor partners and other stakeholders. The city agreed to hold a second meet and confer process should the voters approve and pass Measure JB, which would be on the ballot in November of 2024. Next slide. So on November 5th, 2024, the voters approved Measure JB. This set the stage for the merger of the Civil Service and Human Resources Departments into one unified hiring department, and remove administrative redundancies for the hiring process, establish the new Civil Service Employee Rights and Appeals Commission, and begin the work of modernizing a lot of the hiring processes within the city. The vote was certified by the County of Los Angeles on December 3rd, 2024. And at that point in time, the second round of meet and confer process began, and that resulted in the final labor union approving or signing off in April of 2025. Also to note, during that period of time, due to some of the conversations in the meet and confer process, the employees within the former Civil Service Department were set to come over to the current Human Resources Department, but they did have an opportunity, if they chose, to transfer to other departments that had similar positions. And I believe we may have only had 3 employees opt out of transferring to the department. Next slide, please. So after the merger, the new Unified Human Resources Department will manage all classified and unclassified employee recruitments and hiring processes, again, with the goal of hiring most positions within 90 business days. Prior to the merger, our unclassified recruitments were operating close to the 90-day mark, but we did have a substantial gap in terms of the classified recruitments. So since the merger, we have been working towards reducing the backlog that existed prior to the merger, making sure that those recruitments that were stagnant or weren't moving were in process. Also making sure that we were focusing and triaging any recruitments that were urgent due to critical vacancies. Also with the merger, there was the formation of the new Talent Management Bureau, which allowed for both teams to come together as one bureau and to effectively manage citywide hiring and also to strategically collaborate with departments to fill those vacancies. Most employees and resources, again, like I said, from the Civil Service Department came over, with only a few deciding to opt out. Our city's applicant tracking system, we utilize NeoGov, was previously administered and managed by the Civil Service Department. So now that the departments merged, that went under one roof. And again, the goal was to make sure that we could look at streamlining the hiring process. Next slide. So this is a little bit of just a visual of what the charter amendment brought in terms of new structure within the Human Resources Department. As you can see, there are all the boxes in yellow are the positions that came over as part of the merger, and the positions that were in blue were the current HR positions that were budgeted under the prior talent acquisition division. Next slide. Also, this is an overview of our current department structure. As you can see, next slide. Back one slide. Maybe that slide didn't get captured. It's in my notes. So again, that added a new bureau to our current structure, and we saw that there was a formation or creation of 2 new funded talent acquisition analyst positions dedicated solely to specific departments' recruiting efforts, and those positions were funded by the departments. So that is also aimed at reducing the backlog, which started out around about 102 recruitments prior to the merger. And if we go into the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about the local hiring preferences that were included as part of the charter amendment. So candidates who qualified for classified positions and passed the assessment should be granted a credit of 5 additional points. If they meet one of the following criteria, they can gain up to a maximum of 10 additional points if the candidate meets 2 or more of the criteria. So first criteria is residency. So the candidate has to be, at the time of application, residing within the jurisdictional boundaries of the city of Long Beach. The next category is higher education, where the job description requires or considers a degree. If the candidate graduated or otherwise received a degree from an institution of higher education with on-site campuses located within a 10-mile radius of the jurisdictional boundaries of the city of Long Beach and within the county of Los Angeles. Also, for internal current non-career candidates, at the time of application, if the candidate is employed in a non-career capacity with the city of Long Beach and has completed at least 1,500 hours of service with the city within 2 years preceding the date of the job announcement. And lastly, for internships or apprenticeships, if a candidate participated in an internship or apprenticeship program relevant to the position for which the candidate is seeking employment and has completed at least 1,000 hours of internship or apprenticeship within 2 years prior to the date of the job announcement. Banding and qualifying lists would be the primary way to deploy preferences, with the goal of making the hiring process more equitable by broadening the pool of candidates deemed eligible for a position. Veterans currently receive preference points under the city charter. This proposal would add new local preference categories that veterans could qualify for, thereby ensuring veteran preferences are strengthened through the proposal. One of the other aspects of having the preferences is not just to establish a broader or more robust certified list. But we're also working with departments to make sure that they are conducting more selection interviews of individuals specifically receiving local hiring preference points. This ensures that the preference points are truly a value add to the process. Next slide, please. So where are we now? Again, we're a little over 6 months past post-integration, and we are continuing the work that we started out once we began in earnest with the merger. Obviously one of our first focal points was to look at the 90-day hiring standard. I can report that we are making a lot of progress. We will be reporting out kind of an update, or having an update prepared for the next State of the City address, which will be in January of 2026. But we are making significant progress in this space. Also, within our new hiring structure, we're looking at aligning policies, systems, and our leadership teams to improve efficiency, accountability, and reduce redundancies. Also, we're looking to invest in modernization. So we're looking at different technology and data analytics, to identify talent pools, track recruitment metrics, and optimize hiring timelines. One of the focal points when we talk about 90-day hiring isn't just from the time the applicant applies to the time they're certified to the list, but also to the time in which they're then selected for a position. So this requires us working very closely with departments to make sure that once a certification list is published, that they're not just sitting and not conducting selection interviews. So we're really working with departments to make sure that they don't start the recruitment process until they're ready to actually hire. We talked about the local hiring preference points, but through that process and shortly after we integrated, we spent a lot of time focusing on community engagement with a number of the stakeholders that we had worked with prior to or during the charter amendment process. So this is aimed at fostering stronger community investment and representation, also making sure that we can speak directly to individuals who work, whether it be in the nonprofit space or other spaces, to really hear from them as to what the challenges are, what they're hearing from individuals during the hiring process. For retention and employee engagement, we're looking to standardize our onboarding experience to ensure consistent support for new hires, and also boost early retention, making sure that we're investing in employees not only when they're hired, but also through their career. Looking to also expand leadership development and career growth through training supervisors and managers, and regularly collecting data to ensure feedback and exit surveys are providing value add to the various departments in the city. Also, one of the areas that we have yet to really start working on is looking at modernizing and potentially revising some of our civil service rules. So under the charter amendment, one of the things that we would then look at are also civil service rules to make sure that they're current. Obviously, civil service rules were created at a time when most of us were not alive, and so we want to make sure to take into account gaps in equity, gaps in making sure the process is just modernized. And this includes not only the work on civil service rules, but we're also looking at revamping and modernizing our class specifications, which are almost as old, if not older, than the civil service rules. So there's a lot of work to go, but encouraged by the progress that we've made thus far. And we're going to continue to work together not only with the departments, but also our labor partners. We have held, I think, 2 of 4 post-merger town halls with our labor partners. And we've had really good feedback from them in terms of providing them data with updates, but also just hearing concerns that they have or questions that they have through the process. So with that, that concludes the presentation, and happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. We're gonna kick off with questions. I see Commissioner Thomas, if you want to kick us off.
Yes, a couple of things. Number one, what is the current with regards to demographics? So how many Black folks currently work for the city of Long Beach? And then it's a two-folded question. I think these are good in terms of trying to give these preferences, but I don't necessarily know if they're equitable because most Black folks can't afford to live within the 10-mile radius of Long Beach or Los Angeles. And so the pool of possible candidates are shrinking. And so I'm wondering, how are you mitigating that? So the first thing is that in comparison to the data that we have in terms of Black folks who live in Long Beach, what's the percentage of Black employees?
So I don't have the specific number in front of me today, but that is a question.
Just an estimate.
I don't know if the team, if you have an estimate. Yeah, and I wouldn't want to put like guess on it, but we can provide that information after today just to make sure that you have that as a follow-up. But I will say to your second part of the question relative to the local hiring preferences being equitable. So it's not point to just if you live within the city, it's also points if you've attended schools within the city or close to the city. So we're not just looking at attending schools like this Long Beach City College or Cal State Long Beach. If you've gone to schools in the surrounding 10 miles of the city in any direction, that would also afford you 2 preference points. But I do hear the concern, and one thing that I will say is that with any type of reform, you don't just start out with saying we're going to put new processes or policies in place and that's going to solve everything. We're going to have to continue the work of the outreach to the community groups, and we have done a lot of outreach. I can't remember the total number of groups we worked with, but I believe it was over 10. And we have worked also with the Black Workers Group as well, and engaging them and finding ways to make sure that we can broaden opportunities. I think one of the efforts that I spoke about during the presentation, about not just looking at how we get folks on the list, and this is something that we're working on with the process of our apprenticeships and internships, not only looking at ones that exist, but looking at certifying new ones that we have come across. But I think one of the other efforts is also making sure departments are casting wider nets. So I think it's a multi-pronged process. It's not just getting folks on the list, but also making sure folks get an opportunity to sit in front of hiring managers and make sure that they know they have the competencies to do the work.
Thank you. And as you get back to me with it, I would certainly like to see both management level and staff level in terms of stratified by race.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
And in the queue, I have Commissioner Field, and I'll be after.
Thank you very much. Sorry I missed, you went so fast. I didn't think I missed that much. Just actually some numbers that if you don't have, it's fine. How many unions do you deal with in that particular city?
So we have 11 labor partners in the city of Long Beach.
Okay, thank you. And the total number of employees roughly of the city?
Roughly over 6,000 employees of the city.
Yeah. And I think your slides mentioned a commission. Could you just clarify who's on it, how they get there?
Sure. So with our new Civil Service Employee Rights and Appeals Commission, they are appointed by the mayor. However, we do have what I would consider to be a diverse commission. So it's not just individuals who have previously been city employees or within management. We do have individuals who have been with labor. We have individuals who have been in management, and also individuals who have been in line roles with the city.
How many are on that commission?
We have a 5-person commission, yes.
And just curious, this new department, how many total employees in this particular department?
So with the, and I'm referring to it as a new department, even though it was established before the merger, we have now approximately 120 employees within the department.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And then perhaps I missed this, but was wondering if you could share a little bit more about, so really cool to see kind of the post-integration and implementation that the city is looking into, but can you share a little bit about current hiring process or process that was prior to Measure JB?
So prior to Measure JB, one of the challenges is, I'll say the data analytics piece of it. I can tell you anecdotally some of the feedback that I've heard since I've joined the city, in the sense that on the classified recruitments, a lot of the feedback were that the processes were delayed. It took, I'd probably say, north of a year for folks to be hired, and that is a challenge, right? Because Not only is it, you have candidates sitting and waiting to hear, but we're trying to compete with other agencies and organizations like the city of LA. No offense, but we're trying to compete for talent, and that makes it very difficult to do. So in a short period of time, and really I want to credit the team and the departments for really looking at making sure that we set up more communication channels to work directly on strategically looking at recruitments. Like I mentioned earlier, reducing the backlog. We had at the start, I believe, over 102 recruitments that were backlogged for more than probably 6 months. So the team has been very active in working that down, but also to looking at ways to, again, trying to do the steps that we can do, yet without changing our existing rules, to just modernize the process and be more diligent about hiring. So we have gotten very close to 90 days already without those changes. So why I said I was encouraged is because with the continued effort of partnership, communication with departments, and just really looking at removing barriers, whether artificial or real, I think we will be able to not only achieve that goal, but it's more about making the experience of the candidate more robust. One of the things that I'm really intent on and I'm working with the team on is making sure we have recruitments for similar classifications. I don't want a candidate to have to apply 4 times for a job that has the same classification. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So we're looking at ways to try to, again, not just modernize it, but to be more reasonable and practical through the process.
Yeah, and then for the 90 business day, is that, just for clarification, is that an internal plan or is that written within the charter amendment?
So it was one of the elements of the charter amendment.
I see, okay.
So, I mean, we definitely want to be mindful that we, didn't go to our voters with, a false plan or sense of how we can work towards achieving that.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, there are a number of things that can at times change, statistics or other factors. But I think the goal is to make sure that we don't have some of the barriers in place that led to the charter amendment. This was not something, as you can imagine, that happened overnight. There were previous attempts to look at merging these departments, and they weren't successful. But I think, again, the continued push to revamp this process, modernize this process, led to the support that resulted in the integration of these departments.
Thank you. Why don't you check if fellow commissioners have additional questions?
This will be brief, I think. Could you describe again when, during the entire process, the planning and so on, it sounds like you did meet and confer multiple times. At what stages was that happening with the labor partners?
So once the announcement was made by the mayor during the State of the City in 2024, that really started the initial meet and confer process. So this was before anything was finalized to go to ballot. This really looked at discussing the plan. Obviously, there were a number of concerns that were raised during the process. One of which I can share was one of the concerns was that the merit system or the civil service system would be eroded with this merger. As someone who has worked in various government agencies throughout my career, I'm a huge proponent of the civil service system, and so that was not a focal point of this process. Focal point of this process was to speed up the hiring time, modernize things, and also not be one of a few large municipalities that had this bifurcated system. It had a lot of redundancies that didn't make sense, and it really didn't serve its purpose in terms of bringing in and recruiting and retaining talented individuals. So that first meet and confer process started early January 2024, which did lead to some revisions that ultimately wound up being the charter amendment. During that first meet and confer process, there was also an agreement to come back and hold a second meet and confer process if and when the ballot measure was passed. And so that's something that happened in December of 2024. It concluded in April of 2025, shortly after I arrived, and it didn't conclude because I arrived, but we were able to answer some of the final questions from the few unions who had yet to close that meet and confer process. So that's why you'll notice a gap of time between when the election results were certified versus when we actually were integrated as a unified department.
And thank you. And just for clarity, meaning before the language was finalized, there was meet and confer. And then after it passed by voters, there was meet and confer, which no longer could change the charter language, but could figure out implementation.
We continue to answer questions. A lot of the, I would say, questions in the second meet and confer process that I've learned from various team members and others that have gone through the process was also just making sure that the employees of the Civil Service Department weren't going to be impacted negatively from the process. So that was something that was a true concern for the city. And that's why we had spaces for everyone to come over. It wasn't like we don't have budgeted positions. The room was created for bringing together those two departments.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Thomas?
Yeah, I can't really speak for Long Beach other than I love to go to Long Beach. But in the city of Los Angeles is very anti-Black. I'll say that again, very anti-Black. I don't know if Long Beach is. And so now you found the perfect candidate, right? Gone through the 90-day process. I heard you mention retention having been important. And so what I'm interested in finding out is, specifically for Black folks, it can be very, very difficult in a government space where there are few Black people. So that's why I asked the initial question. And so, was that taken into consideration when this charter recommendation was made? Was it also the environment? What kind of environment would this be providing? And again, I speak specifically regarding, I lead with race because if you don't, it never gets on the table. So that's why I do that. I'm not excluding anybody, but I'm being intentional about what I'm saying. Because there's an added kind of pressure. And so I'm just wondering, what have you all found, and have you attempted to mitigate that? And would you recommend that be a consideration even as we think about charter language?
Yes, I appreciate the question. I can't, I think, speak to the history of the city, but I can speak to what the city is focused on moving forward. I think the city has been very intentional about diversity, equity, and inclusion across all spaces. And I think one of the things that is unique for me in this role as the Director of Human Resources is I get an opportunity to work directly with the things that I consider to be historical barriers for any groups that are minorities or underrepresented in the government space. So that's specific to, as I mentioned earlier, looking at antiquated policies and rules, looking at things that just don't they don't speak to what we're doing currently. So I think it has to be a holistic approach, right? I don't think there's a one solve it all kind of like formula for it, but I think we have to be intentional across all spaces, and that includes training hiring managers on what the selection process really should be. Something that I think is very important as we look to modernize the recruitments, as well as also like how are we testing? I think I came in with the last presentation, we were talking about different efforts of looking at, or the feedback from some of the exams. Those are some of the same things that we hear in Long Beach. And I think it's very important to be intentional about the work that we do in that space. I can't, one of the things I'm asking my teams across the department are, tell me what the oldest policy is. Tell me what the oldest rule is. Those things are important to me because if I hear that rules were, implemented in 1945, that tells me, why and how they were created. So we're not going to solve all those issues overnight, but it has to be a intentional and holistic process that starts with the work that we're doing within our department, but also how we are recruiting. If we're just recruiting in certain spaces or traditional spaces, we're not going to get candidates where there are. I also think it's important for us to look at competencies versus just looking at educational achievements. I think we need to have options. We need to have pathways for folks to be able to qualify to compete for our positions. So it's building pipelines, it's making sure that we have relationships not only internally within the city, but also with stakeholder groups that work within the city or close with the city to make sure that we're creating a space for everyone to apply. The other part to this is really tracking data to then be very intentional about looking where there are gaps. So when we talk about getting folks in the door, that's one part of the process, but then it's also how do we create promotional pathways? How do we create pathways for individuals who have worked for the city for a number of years, but maybe they want to go into another field or profession without having to go back to school. And this was something, I'm not going to take credit for it because it was conceptualized by a former director I worked for with the Internal Services Department with the county, but we created a program like that within our department. And so I get to bring some of that to the city of Long Beach. And the goal is to make sure that we're not looking at just the traditional ways that folks have applied or promoted, but we're looking at all pathways. Because my goal is, I know I'm not going to be in this role forever, so I want to leave it better than I found it, and that's not a knock on how I found it. But my goal is to make sure that we are creating inclusive spaces for all, and making sure that we can start as early as possible, recruiting in areas where we know are difficult, but also making sure that folks that when they apply and when they come on board, they have opportunities to grow and learn, and not just going to trainings, like on-the-job training, things that they'll be able to then say, I've had this experience while they're competing for a promotional position. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you presenting to us today.
Thank you, everyone.
Alrighty, we are gonna queue up our next presentation. Give us a few minutes to get this ready. We have the people's budget coming up next, and that's gonna be Tabatha, Melina, and David. They're coming up, and we're gonna get the deck ready for you.
Okay. We got the deck lined up.
Thank you again, Long Beach.
And I forgot to tell you, Long Beach is the best.
It is pretty good. I have to be careful because I want to keep my job.
Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, very helpful.
Thank you.
I asked yesterday, when we just.
We'll just have to do it for you. Yeah.
Okay, it's possible to stay here.
Yeah.
I can see the screen.
And just so you all know, that would be Dr. Melina, Dr. Tabatha, and Professor.
Well, and Bob.
Right,
Professor.
Professor.
No, I don't say
So should I start?
Yes, please, right up to the lecture.
So I want to thank Commissioner Thomas for that. I noticed that we're speaking in formalities here, and I do want to underscore what Dr. Thomas, Commissioner Thomas emphasized. It feels very disrespectful when everyone else is referred to as commissioner or, you know, and then the three Black people who come up are called by our first names when we actually do have PhDs behind them. So I would ask you to not do that
I
again.
apologize. I was going to do a formal introduction when you got up here. Sorry, I was just breaking it down. I apologize.
Okay, so we haven't met before?
No.
So I'm Dr. Melina Abdullah. And I don't normally do that, but I want to be clear. Okay. Thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Melina Abdullah. I am Professor of Pan-African Studies at Cal State LA's College of Ethnic Studies. I'm also, and good to see you, Commissioner Field, And I'm also co-founder of Black Lives Matter Los Angeles, Black Lives Matter Grassroots, which convenes the People's Budget, which is a collective of many groups, including the Black Workers Center. So glad to see you all here. I know the room was packed before with our Black Workers Center comrades also here. I wanted to lift up, there's just a few points that I want to make before I turn the floor over to Dr. Tabatha Jones-Jolivet. And that is that I want to start with that Los Angeles belongs to the people.
That's right.
Los Angeles belongs to the people. And I know that sometimes as a former city employee, I'm also a former staffer to the Charter Reform Commission. So when we were developing neighborhood councils, I was one of the leads who helped to, I guess it was 19 years ago.
But the elected or the?
The elected,
The elected.
yes. And so I know this process well. I've been engaged in this process. And I want to uplift that one of the things that I hope that you all will be attempting to do is to make this process, as well as the city, belong to the people. So anybody who knows me knows that I don't bite my tongue very well. So I'm gonna say that I'm very disappointed that this meeting is on a campus that's very closed, that it costs people a minimum of $20 to park and come here, that this is being held in a place that and at a time that most people can't get to. And some of our recommendations are about the city itself and making meetings, making public engagements, making civic engagement, and I see some of my students are here, more accessible to Angelenos. The city belongs to the people. The city belongs to the people. So it might be more convenient for commissioners or staffers to do this during the workday. And I know you like late night meetings, but it might be more convenient to you all to do it at this time, but it's not convenient to regular Angelenos, which is who the city belongs to. I'm starting with that because the people's budget is about making the city belong to its people. It's about making the city belong to its people. So in 2020, we remember that the world, it's a moment that I always call a moment when the world cracked wide open. For many reasons, we remember that there was a COVID crisis and it felt like the end of the world. And we were trying to figure out what this means. We know that when the rest of the world gets a cold, Black people get pneumonia. And so as Black Lives Matter Los Angeles, we were deeply concerned about what this moment means for Black Angelenos in particular. And we pulled together virtually every single Black-led organization in the greater Los Angeles area, and we all developed these priorities for Black Los Angeles during this moment of crisis. You'll remember that just a few months later, George Floyd was one of 3 people who was murdered by the hands of police. And in May, we remember the COVID crisis, and the lockdown was coupled with a mass uprising. Already underway was something called the People's Budget, because in the midst of a COVID crisis, one of the things that we noticed, and I was in direct conversation immediately with Baba Akili, who's one of our longtime leaders of not just Black Los Angeles, but of people-centered politics in this country. And so I reached out to Baba Akili, and what we saw was huge spending on LAPD, and a refusal to spend on the things that we need in the midst of one of the greatest health crises, at least of my lifetime, and I'm 53 years old. And so we decided that it was really, really important that resources went into making sure that Black people were safe, and when Black people are safe and free, so is everyone else. And so when George Floyd is then killed, this moment where we're saying to redirect funds to make sure that we have a free and safe and healthy Los Angeles, it becomes exponentially more important. And so the people's budget then pulled in many, many other groups. So we had Black Los Angeles, but then we also began working with other organizations, Central CSO, White People for Black Lives, many organizations that you see listed there, and Commissioner Fields can see it. Yeah. So here are some of the organizations that we worked with, and of course that group GROW, Youth and March for Our Lives, and we all developed this people's budget. What I want my remarks to just conclude on is that our goal here, recognizing what the city charter is to say that in our first year, in 2020, we had a city council president in Herb Wesson who was very open to hearing from the people. And there was an epic moment that became one of the moments of the Black Lives Matter early renaissance in 2020, where we presented the people's budget before city council in city council chambers because Herb Wesson invited us in. The mayor remained adversarial and would not listen to the people's budget presentation. At that time, the mayor was Eric Garcetti. We know that since Karen Bass has been mayor, she's been open to receiving the people's budget presentation, which has continued every year beyond 2020. But we don't think that the people's budget process, which engages tens of thousands of Angelenos, should be reliant on whether or not a mayor or a city council president likes us. It should be part of the budgeting process. And so that's why we're here, is to ask you all as a commission to be courageous enough to say, yes, Los Angeles belongs to Angelenos, it belongs to the people, and the people's budget needs to be a part of the budgeting process. And so with that, I'd like to invite up Dr. Tabatha Jones-Jolivet, who leads our research team, who's a professor and a scholar and can do something that I can't do, which is count numbers. She's a quantitative methodologist. It will just be Melina math. It will be Melina math, but yes.
It's okay. I can just pull this back.
There, and just hit the space bar and that should do it for you.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Abdullah, for just opening our presentation. Lift the mic. Okay. How's that? Testing, testing. Can y'all hear me in the back?
Yes.
All right, just making sure that we're not the only ones in the room, because we know that after presentation after presentation after presentation, it can start to feel like business as usual. And that's not why we're here. We are not here for business as usual, because business as usual doesn't reflect what we know to be true. And these are the words of Ruth Wilson Gilmore. Life is precious. Life is precious. And that is why we are here to talk about the people's budget. It's not a regular business as usual kind of presentation. So I hope that you will feel free, if you feel moved, to give an amen. I'm a minister. Yes, I hope you will feel free to participate, because as Dr. Abdullah just lifted, LA belongs to the people, and it's high time we ensure that our processes reflect that. Yes? Yes. All right. Actually, I guess I should do that.
There you go.
All right.
Works.
I feel hyped up already, because these are consequential times. These are consequential times that demand courage, and they demand presence. And they demand people power. And that's why we are here to tell you about a beautiful project. I never thought that budgeting could be beautiful. I never thought this. I feel often broke and hardly able to pay bills. But when I come together among the people, we capture a different kind of vision. The vision of Los Angeles that all of us deserve. And that is through a participatory budgeting process that draws on a different kind of imaginary. Not the imaginary that results in the same old status quo that, to be clear, is deadly, but instead an imaginary that ensures that we see a world where we are free and alive and resourced, investing in what matters and divesting from what's killing us, so that we can drive aliveness for all of us, most especially people who have been harmed by the status quo. And so our community-led, community-driven, not community-engaged, community-led and community-driven participatory budgeting process is one that follows in the tradition of people like Ella Baker. When she says this, and I think these are two really critical beliefs to begin with, along with the idea that life is precious. Ella Baker says that, I believe the ability of everyday people to understand their own problems and to solve them. People. I also believe, she says, that oppressed people, whatever their education, have the ability to understand and interpret the world around them and to see that world for what it is and to move to transform it. And that is what we have been doing in this beautiful budgeting process. And we're looking to see that that process is systematized, because since 2020, for every single budget cycle, everyday regular people like us have been facilitating a community-led and driven process that ensures that Angelenos are at the center of voicing their priorities for the city. And in fact, we have engaged thousands of Angelenos every single year, from residents of this city, people who vote in this city, stakeholders in this city, in processes that ensure that they can voice their perspectives in surveys meaningfully. And secondly, that in community meetings and in town halls that are led by the people to ensure that their voices can be lifted when they are often disregarded and disrespected. So what we've done in the People's Budget, having surveyed now more than 32,000 people in this period of 5 years and engaged with more than 60,000 Angelenos across our town hall forums and community meetings, we have centered and prioritized those voices that are often neglected. And neglect is another way of talking about harm, abuse, voices that are disregarded in the city's regular status quo budgeting process. Black people, brown people, people who are disabled, working people who ought to be able to access meetings like this, poor folks and migrants. And 2025 makes this really clear for us. People who've been devastated by wildfires that are still suffering in real time. Survivors of crime, and when I talk about crime survivors, I also mean people who have been harmed by the state, the divestment that the state perpetually engages in, the ways in which police harm our people, which often leads to premature death, and along with that, the many, many ways that the carceral system continues to impact people. We center those voices. We say you ought to be at the center of driving what this city ought to look like, because you are closest to the pain. And your imagination for what we deserve is often the wisest and most acute. And so we partner with coalition-based community organizations, many of the ones you saw in Melina's presentation. We share resources with one another, ensuring that we strive to build power in a process that engages the people in imagining what their everyday lives ought to look like. And that imagination then not be driven by the way things are. In this process, therefore, we've gathered rich data, both qualitatively through the town halls and community meetings, and also through this very systematic process of an annual survey. And in doing so, I don't think this is going to surprise any thinking person who has a heart for what it means to actually build a city that we all deserve. People consistently say the same thing, and that is consistently disregarded in the budgeting process, and that is to say, let's invest in people's universal needs, from housing and care, food security, assistance economically, right? Investing in our children's well-being, youth's well-being, investing in healthcare, environmental justice and climate change responsiveness. This doesn't surprise us. We know that this is what we need. People have also said they want to see investments consistently every single year in a reimagined vision of community safety, one that relies on community care care workers, actual mental health care. Imagine that being one of the first ways that we can ensure that people can flourish in their individual and communal lives, along with restorative models for justice and investment in our communities, including neighborhood empowerment. And finally, people have repeatedly said, and I bet I can get an amen on this, let's fix the built environment. How many potholes I gotta drive over? How long you gonna keep trash on the street? Let's do what is required to invest in parks and recreation and libraries. We know at a time when reading anything seems to be criminalized, this is the first place we ought to be making an investment. And the first time we've seen this was in this particular year when we launched the survey, we saw nearly 85% of people said invest in the fire department. Now I wonder why, because they understand the climate catastrophe that we are surviving and what we must do in order to change it. And at the center of that change is disrupting the status quo. People say 3 things need to be divested from. Divest from policing, divest from prosecution, and divest from, watch this, parking. Don't make people pay for parking, what we had to do to come to this very meeting. When instead we ought to be here dreaming of the Los Angeles that all of us need to help grow. And so as Baba Akili comes forward to offer a call to action, what I want to emphasize is this finally. Baba Akili, you want to start coming up? I've gone past my slide here, but bear with me. What I want to emphasize is this. We cannot continue a status quo that disregards the voices of the people, and not only the voices, but the priorities of the people that have repeatedly been amplified through the people's budget. And we have, particularly with the work of the commission and people power, a real opportunity to make a shift. And not just a shift in voice, but a shift in power, using the charter and reforming the charter to, in fact, ensure, as Melina mentioned earlier, that a people's budgeting, community-led process is at the center of any city budgeting. People should not give input to the city's budget. People should be driving it. And so for that reason, it's going to demand that we dislodge from the status quo that continues to invest billions and billions of dollars every year, the largest share of the budget in policing. And that is not just to mention the base budget of $3.4 billion. Is that right, Kenneth? I see our controller is in the room. That is to add the liability that you are paying for when the police officers harm people. That's to also not even include the amount of discretionary funds every year, the money that you can use on anything that continues to be invested in the state of policing that is producing the kinds of outcomes that disregard the everyday lives of Angelenos. And so for that reason, I hope that you feel activated with a different kind of imaginary because it comes from the people. And Baba Akili is now going to close with our call to action.
Thank you. And
You're welcome.
And let me say that the Baba is a title. It's not my name. So for those of you, very quickly, because I do want to make sure we stay within our time frame. One of the things that I'm asked to do a lot, because I'm 77 years old, is to reflect and review. That is, reflect on what has happened and let's review it and project to what needs to happen. And one of the things I want to make sure we know of, that the results that you saw was from all 15 districts, not just 1 or 2 districts, all 15 districts. And so one of the observations that I've had and lessons that's learned, because that's one of the things I get called on a lot to do, is make observations and talk about lessons learned. One of the lessons that I think is learned is that first, people want to participate. They really want to participate. But they don't want to participate in shams. They don't want to participate in photo ops. They don't want to participate in performative town halls. They want real participation. They want, if they're going to spend their time, energy, and effort to share this with you, they want real results. They want to be a part of making real results. And the only way you can do that is to create an independent People's Budget Commission. That's first, independent. Second, that's fully resourced. Fully resourced. I'm gonna say that again, because if you don't fully resource it, it becomes something worse than the departments that already exist. It has to be independent, fully resourced. It has to, as was stated in the first slide that you saw, has to be centered in the real resource of the people. And that lived experience has to be meaningful, valued, and incorporated, just like so-called experts. Because too often what we do is we depend on the experts and dismiss lived experience. And so it has to be centered in the people first, as Melina opened with, and then it has to be connected to lived experience. And it has to be, the emphasis should be on those communities that have been over-policed and underinvested in. And then finally, it should do two things. At least be able to make regular reports about the input that people had and if it was taken. And finally, we should be able to issue a no confidence in this budget if it doesn't reflect what our input was. That's a transformative change that we are calling on this commission to not only review, consider, and advance, but actually to create a better Los Angeles. A people's budget commission that's first independent, second that's resourced, thirdly that's centered in the people's interest, understanding, and concern, and fourthly have the capacity to say, no, that was not what we said. That is your call to action, and that's transformative. And I hope I'm in my 3-minute time period. What do you think?
Thank you so much. We're gonna call the presenters back to the floor so we can do a
We're being called back?
Yes, we want you here.
Test, test.
No, this mic up here, that one side.
So this one's not working anymore?
Yeah.
Melina, come on.
Well, first off, thank you.
Thank y'all for listening.
First off, thank you for the presentation, for speaking and bringing energy into the room. I'm going to pass it over to our commissioners to see if there's any beginning questions. We'll start with Commissioner Field.
Well, thank you. This is probably the most passionate presentation we've heard the whole time. And I'm going to ask kind of maybe a very controversial question, because I happen to personally, I speak only as an individual, of course, not for the committee or the commission. Of course, everything you said we need to do better, social services, healthcare, libraries, all of that. I also happen to think we need some form of well-trained and respectful law enforcement. I don't think that our community is ready to be without some form. Again, respectful and well-trained being a couple of the essentials. And what I saw in the presentation was, forgive me, but it's our scarcity mentality. Why don't we raise taxes? Why don't we make the wealthiest people in LA pay enough so we can have respectful and well-trained law enforcement as needed, not for the doggone parking enforcement and all those other, and trained in order not to abuse people, and all the rest. I mean, I guess I'm saying I don't see it as an either or completely, because there's some form of protection of the public that, again, respectful, well-trained law enforcement should be able and is needed for. So just throwing that out there.
So I would love to have this conversation with you about why I'm an abolitionist and why I believe that those who descend from slave catching can't be redeemed, right? That doesn't mean I don't believe in public safety. Many of you who've known me for a very long time know that in my former life, I actually did work in Watts around community-based public safety and continue to do that work as a volunteer, kind of helping that to grow, right? The point of our presentation is that we need you in the people's budget meetings to be a part of the community of Angelenos who define for themselves what it is we need. I live off of Crenshaw. My oldest child is sitting up there. And they came home, what was that, day before yesterday? Yeah, about why are there so many cops on Crenshaw? right? We don't need all those cops on Crenshaw. Why do we have a helicopter over our house every single day? Every single day, right? Multiple times, right? Nothing's happened. It's just there to annoy us, is what we're convinced of, or spy, right? But these are the kinds of really rich conversations that we have in the people's budgeting process, right? Where you get to hear from neighbors in Watts and neighbors in the Crenshaw district about why we don't want them in our neighborhood, right? And we get to hear from you why you think police are the answer, right? And maybe they should be in your neighborhood. I don't know. I don't think so, right? Yeah, I'm happy to make that an interim modification, right? All police can go to your neighborhood, right? But I think the point of our presentation isn't even about that. This is the data that we're getting back from community, right? What we want folks to understand, and as the Charter Reform Commission, is that this data is really important. And we need to formalize being able to present the data and resource being able to present the data regardless of who's in office. And that can be written into the city charter. So I would love to talk, because I love talking about that question that you raised. I would love to talk about why I'm an abolitionist and how I came to it. I wasn't always, right? And have that conversation. But the point that we want to make to this commission is that this shouldn't be dependent on who's in office. We should be able to present this, have that resourced, and I want to be very clear about what Baba Akili offered in the call to action. We want to make sure that the people's budget process remains with the people. We're not proposing that it be incorporated into a city department. That the way that it moves right now, the reason we have the number of respondents that we do is because when the Black Workers Center says, hey, Black workers, we need you to respond, or we need you to come to this, we want to hear from you, they're trusted, and their members, as well as the people who are engaged with them, will come. When, the Reverence Project reaches out in Watts, they'll come, they'll complete the survey, they'll do those things. But if it's housed in a city department, that won't happen. So the ask is really for resourcing and incorporating the people's budget process into the city charter.
Thank you, that's very helpful.
And can I just also join with Melina in making just this very brief comment? I think when we talk about abundance, which, as a person who begins with life is precious, I understand abundance. All I gotta do is go look at the roots of that tree outside when I walked up to understand how deep abundance really goes when life is moving. That is not the same thing as the kind of scarcity paradigm that produces the same outcomes year after year after year. The police budget, as an example, despite the wishes that people have, right, continues to be, as Pete White, an organizer with LAANE says, recession-proof. When everything else is extracted from policing and all of the resources that marshal in that direction continue to rise. And people keep saying, I don't feel safe. Right? So we love to talk more about that vision at another time, but whether we agree on that or not, the fundamental point is the people shouldn't have to beg to get in front of those who have power to make decisions about the budget. Right. The people shouldn't have to beg for it. They shouldn't have to give timed public comments on the whims of people who get to decide when and where those meetings are held. No, the people ought to be sharing power at the center of driving this budgeting process. That's why we think the charter reform process and your role on the charter alongside the people can be so necessary in transforming the charter to reflect a people-driven, community-led people's budgeting participatory process.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you all, because I thought your presentation was outstanding, and yes, I'm biased. I love these people. So let's just get that out of the way. But what I don't want to be missed, because there was a person who was slated to become a part of this commission, who said to the LA Times that is the most, I think he said, anti-police commission that we've ever had, and I will not sit on it, is what now. Truth be told, Nobody wanted him on it, but that's just a whole other thing. But, you know, but I want to make sure that we understand. That's why I wish that you could have presented to the entire commission. Because we can't fully communicate what we heard.
Have us back.
Right, I think that's good. And so I don't want people to think that this is about defunding the police, though they need to be defunded. I want to be very clear. Just like any other group that isn't effective. And so I want folks to understand and know that this is historical. For the first time in my lifetime, the people, all of them, the ones who are consistently left behind, showed interest in what the city does in real time by constructing a budget. And there is no way, in my opinion, that an elected official, now they'll say I'm talking off topic and I'm preaching or whatever, you know, but I'm just being me. There is no way that any city official should be allowed to refuse and ignore the work of the people. Because the surveys that they conduct, when they hire these institutions to do these surveys, they're not talking to the people that you all have reached. And so there's something to be said about reaching people that folks around this space consider to be historically disengaged, don't care. And so I want to make sure that nobody leaves this room, and anybody that watches this, that they understand this is about a study that was done and a budget came out of it that is identifying what the people say they need to do. And if the people say that the police need to be defunded, then the police need to be funded, if the people say that. And so this is not an agenda that you all are on personally, other than the fact that you want the people to be heard. And so I want to suggest to the commission, Justin, that this presentation be done for the full commission, so that all of the commissioners can get an opportunity to ask questions. Because I don't want this to be cast in a light that is not appropriate and that does not represent what was done in this room today, and that does not represent the work. Y'all got paid for this?
No.
The work.
We wind up costing.
We had to pay to come here. What you mean?
So I'm just saying. Yeah, I'm kind of done with that $20 too, because I had to pay $20 too.
I took Metro.
You should have been paying.
I paid for Metro.
I put my complaint in immediately about that.
If we didn't, do we have snacks because there's no police here? Is that what it is? Because we paying for police to be at our meetings, and I don't know how much that costs, but it probably costs a lot of money. We could have had free parking.
It's not cheap.
We could have had free parking for everybody if we didn't do that. No, they're not here today. Not today, but I'm saying they're normally here, 2 of them. So I don't know how much they cost, but we don't need them.
Well, I tell you what, as a result of the work that we've done as a people, and I know you're going to be hearing next from the controller's office, there is a tool that now exists in the city where you can look and see the budget yourself. We don't have to wonder. We don't have to ask these questions. I'll let the controller talk about where to go find that. But when I just see a basic chart that is the same year after year, where the first line on the chart is the longest, meaning most of the resources go there, and all of the others, as it goes down in a descending order, continue to shrink. That tells me everything I need to know. I don't need the PhD to understand that. right? So look at the budget yourself. Look at it yourself and you decide, is this the ethical vision we have for a city that we all deserve? That's what our presentation is about and why we need your advocacy alongside us as commissioners to move towards changing the charter.
But one key point about it is part of the reason why I was asked to do this, because early on in the 90s, I was involved in participatory democracy. Participatory budgeting. And they came to me for all the wrong reasons. They thought what they wanted, the mechanics of how do you help mobilize people. And I kept trying to tell them, if you mobilize people and tell them that they got a voice, they're gonna turn that voice into a demand. And that's what happened. But the other thing that happened is people got disappointed. They got disaffected and they felt frustrated. So they spent this time, energy, and effort to say, here's what we think, here's what we want. And then they felt they were dismissed. And so without a way to hold people accountable, then the participation is not enough. That it has to be, I have to be able to see whether you at least made an effort to incorporate what I said. And if you didn't, there ought to be a consequence for it. There ought to be some accountability. 32,000 people participated with us. I mean, and I've been in the survey, and I know that because I've been around to a lot of communities to get people to fill out those surveys. The people who participated with us at those town halls, they shared what they wanted. And then other people in other positions made different decisions, disconnected from the information that they got. And if there's no consequence, if there's no willingness to incorporate what the people say, then people will not feel, one, listened to, heard, or considered. And if they feel that, two things will happen. Resistance and anger is one, or simply withdrawal. And we don't want either, because this is the people's budget, not their budget.
That's right.
We should have, this is, and we open with, this is the people's budget. And if we are not reflected when it comes out, then there ought to be steps that we can take to make sure that that we are reflected. Because then it's no longer the people's budget, it's somebody else's budget.
Okay. Thank you. This is all getting more and more helpful. So I want to get real specific, a few questions. And I'm not sure if you've done this at this point or you want to look into it further. Given this charter, which is like this thick, where do you see such a clause or an article? Is it part of whatever's in the charter about budget or budget process? Is that where you see this going?
Yeah, in the budgeting process.
Okay. And are you, and I just heard Baba Akili say something, and I want to double check. I heard you all agree, and makes sense to me, you want to be heard. You don't want to be at the whim of whoever's the council president or mayor. You want it to be built in, charter requirement. The process is funded, resourced, and it is listened to.
Yes.
I assume you mean in the timely manner based on the budget cycle and all that.
That's right.
But now Baba Akili mentioned something about not just being heard, but it actually being enacted in some way. And my question is, so where's the relationship between recommendations? Maybe that's not strong enough word. I'm saying recommendations from a people's budget process and the role of the council as kind of the mayor and council being the final authority as it is now. Do you see their authority changing? Because you don't want to just be heard, you actually want a commitment that they will act on some or all of your proposal?
Yeah, very quickly, I want to use the neighborhood councils as an example.
Good, I was going to ask.
Because you were a part of that. The neighborhood councils conceptually was a great idea, but what is that turned into is what? And I think that you should look at that model and say, here's some lessons that we've learned that we don't either want to repeat or we want to continue. That's the first thing. The second thing is if you don't build in a outcome that's connected to the people's interests, all you have is, this was a great idea. And so we are looking at ways to do that. And I think between Melina and Dr. Tabatha Jones that we can figure that out. but there has to be a consequence built in. We should be able to say, we have no confidence in that budget. We don't believe in that budget. We don't support that budget. And we should, and part of what I've seen, and this is another advantage, I've seen people who come before the city council and elected officials, developers and bankers, they have real interest. The people have issues. No, our interest is as valuable and meaningful as developers and other people. We don't have issues, we have interest too. And our interest is to make sure that we are heard. And the other thing that we talked about is that we want to center lived experience, not just calling in budgetary experts. What do the people say about the community they live in? And why does it take 7 years to get a light replaced? Why does it take 5 years to get our alleys clean? And let people say that, and then let's have a regular report to see if what we reflected in our survey is incorporated in the budget. And if it isn't, then there ought to be a consequence. That you should not be able to come before us again as an elected official and say, well, this is how the budget is, I'm sorry. There ought to be some consequence in that.
Next election.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, I think this is democracy. And what is interesting to me is that democracy always seems to look different when it is a concept that is being promoted by the underrepresented and the underserved and Black folks. At the end of the day, a participatory budgeting process is just that. There is no way in the world that you develop a budget that doesn't address the needs of the majority of the people in this city. And that happens year after year after year after year. We hear these conversations about, and this is going back to this whole corruption thing. You know, we keep talking about corruption, but broad-based corruption is never discussed. It's about someone personally committing some kind of impropriety. Well, again, that's between them and their God ultimately. I'm talking about the broad-based corruption that is pawned off as policy. Mm-hmm. And so what I hear you all saying is that, well, and whether elected officials like it or not, people don't get together and develop this kind of budget and just let you say, well, we're. So there's going to be a reaction and a response, regardless. But why create another crisis in the city when the people want what's best and the folks who are representing the people should want what's best? And so if we've been doing this for as long as we have, and we've yet to get it right because we're in debt right now, there's been budgets, but we're in debt, probably some of the greatest debt that we've ever been in. Why? We had a budget. So maybe this is the solution. And so I totally agree that there should be, along with this process, along with not just saying we're going to do this participatory budgetary process, because we're supposed to have a civilian police commission, and we know what that is. So we have to ensure that this remains the people's. That's right. And what we're asking you brilliant people to do, to make recommendations about how we do that and how that should be reflected in the charter.
And I'll make a last comment, but I think coming into this, one of my first few questions was just what opportunities do you see for more engagement from the public and from the ground in the community? But you answered that right away. But I would just say overall, like personally, I would be interested in hearing more from the People's Budget and specifically more about the structure that you proposed, but what are from your work doing and speaking with community, reactions of things that we're talking about in this commission, or in this committee, but also full commission around budget and personnel, I feel like you all are so tapped into community, and that having y'all as kind of in between messenger, but also just sharing what you're hearing from the ground is really valuable for us. And that I think we're missing that piece. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you. The people are the medicine.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Kenneth and team, come on down while we get your presentation ready.
I'm just biased. I'll see you again.
Yay, okay. Now we have, this one? Maybe? There we go. Now we have our city controller, Mr. Kenneth Mejia, presenting. We've got the deck ready. I think we're good to go. Alrighty. Just let us, you can either stand here, wherever you want to be. Sure. I could this works. Yeah. And then just hold the space bar to your point. Alright. PowerPoints. Okay. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Ooh, everyone's asleep. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
There we go. Thank you, Dr. Tabatha. Shout out Dr. Melina, Abdullah, Akili. Hello, everyone. My name is Kenneth Mejia. I am your city controller. And today I'll be talking about the budget process. I've been here for 3 years and it's broken. Our budget process is broke. We are proposing 3 reforms that we want to get in the charter. And you don't have to put it in the charter, but when you put it in the charter, it becomes like the Constitution. It becomes memorialized, and whoever's in office, whether in the future, they cannot ignore it because it's stuck there. And so we're talking about systemic reform. So the 3 things are multi-year budgeting, performance-based budgeting, and participatory budgeting, as mentioned. So it's broken. In City Hall, the budget is all year long. And all of it usually takes place behind closed doors. No one really knows what's happening. Once you pass a budget and you start the fiscal year, you jump into the next year's budget already. And you don't really get the time to assess, well, how the hell did we do with this budget we just started? The answer is you don't. You don't. There's limited opportunity for public input, and it encourages short-term solutions, right? Oh, we're in a budget crisis. Let's just cut every vacant position without realizing like we needed that position. That's how the city handles their finances. If they need money, they need to cover liability claims. They'll just find whatever department has a vacancy, even though they need that position, and they'll be like, let's just sweep it. And there's really no meaningful input. So that's the way it currently is. It's not good. And as you can see here, we start the fiscal year in July, and right away in August, literally the next month, we start again. Look at it. You just start again, and it uses so many hours of staff, thousands of hours of staff, to just go through the same process that you just started, literally. So I'll keep going. So it's a huge effort, as I said, and all they're doing is taking the budget that they just passed a month ago, and they're saying, hey, let's just add a couple million here, a couple million there, or less million here. And that's not a good way of trying to run a city or achieve goals for what you want to accomplish as a city. And as we mentioned, very little time to evaluate how you're doing and little opportunity for public participation because it's just, so fast. But no long-term planning. In addition, with this current cycle, we don't make big programmatic or efforts in capital infrastructure as well. So that's also another thing too that you see with these one-year budgets is we invest a lot in capital infrastructure, but we really don't start working on it until more than a year after, right? And so, if
it has made things more difficult for this city, and we're like the largest city that actually doesn't have a capital infrastructure plan. So what you have when it comes to infrastructure are a bunch of hodgepodge projects spread across 15 districts, and whichever constituent or donor gets mad at your elected official and says, hey, I gave you $1,000, like fix my street light. That's how things get fixed in City Hall. And that's not how it shouldn't be. There should be a plan. And that's why we're advocating for a long-term plan that can also implement a capital infrastructure plan, which you can't get right now with the current one-year cycle. And that here comes multi-year budgeting. So we are a proponent of multi-year budgeting, 2-year budgets. We've been pushing this since we started. And this is how it would look like. So in the first year, you're actually working. So let's just pretend that we just passed the budget, right? So then you jump into the first year now of the next thing. So you just passed the budget, you're in the first year, so you're preparing what your capital infrastructure plan will be over the next 2 years. Like, what are you working on? What is the goal? In addition, as time passes, we're also gonna be implementing performance metrics. We're gonna be looking at what are we getting for our tax dollars from these departments? They have this budget, let's get them to report monthly or even quarterly, what are we getting for these tax dollars? And then as the time passes until December, you keep analyzing and you keep deliberating. And then as you see here, as you get closer to the end of the first year, because you're about to jump into the second year, you start to get into, okay, why don't we actually start incorporating the people through a participatory budgeting process? So at the end of the first year, you're sort of getting into all this. So this would be the first year. Then you jump to the second year. And that's where you could actually start doing the budget process again. So you spend the first year really planning, really analyzing how things are going. You still do it now, but you are incorporating, as you saw in the last slide towards the end, the participatory side, getting the public input. So that way it shapes the budget process when it finally gets delivered and posted in the second half of the second year, which it will be around April or May or June. And so, one big thing that I want to point out is the way it currently is right now is every year at April 20th, the mayor releases her budget. And then by June 1st, that's 40 days. You have to approve it. So we recommend, releasing it a month earlier. So that way you have 2.5 months to deliberate. So even much more time. And that's the benefit of having a 2-year cycle, is you could actually release the budget sooner. And so I'm showing you, the last slide and this slide as an example of what the timeline would be. So that way okay, this is how it would look like if we move towards it. And then these are the advantages of a 2-year budget. Promotes longer term planning. It slashes thousands of hours of repetitive time. So the folks who are constantly working on the budget could actually work on evaluating their departments to see how they're doing. It also allows more upfront goal setting and public participation. As you saw, we would like participatory budgeting included towards the end of the first year of the second half. And then allows the second year to be devoted to adjustments, whether it's to your capital infrastructure plan or to your operating budget. And it also allows and accounts for the city's slow hiring process. If you work for the city of LA, it could take 8 months or more than a year to hire somebody. So the way it is now is you have this new budget and say you got new positions added. And what the city will do is they'll say, oh my God, you haven't filled these positions. Like, I'm gonna cut it. And it's only been 6 months into the fiscal year. But because we start the budget process so soon, that's how it is right now. And that's why we also need to fix, our hiring process as well, right? So this could account for that, but it's not to say that we should keep the slow hiring process. It's saying, hey, maybe we should fix it too. But it does account for it if we have a 2-year budget. So this is how it would look like if you were looking at it from a budget book. You would have your actuals listed for, the prior 3 years, and then you see the budget, which is the current fiscal year, the current adopted budget. And then you plan for the next 2 years. And this is all a sample. I didn't, make this up, but this is on the general fund revenue side. So you could see how it would look like, how we're planning for it. You can see how much of a percentage each revenue category takes of the total budget as well. And then you could also see on the very right side the year-to-year changes on how things look. And then this is how it would look like from an expenditure side. So same thing, on the 3 left columns are the actuals for the prior 3 fiscal years. Then you have your current fiscal year budget, which is what it is right now. And then you have 2 years out and how you would plan it. And then on the top section, because there's 3 sections, on the top, it shows by department. And then the second middle portion talks about what makes up those accounts in that department. Usually it's salaries, overtime, travel, transportation, So that breaks it out even more. I think we're using aging in this example in the middle and in the bottom. And also we also have a sample of what it would look like if you use it at a programmatic level. So this is how it will look like in the budget book, and if you have questions more. But here are the changes that a multi-year budget requires. With this 2-year budget, you can be more realistic with your budget projections as you have more time to evaluate both spending and revenues. And with this 2-year budget, you have constant reassessments of projections and milestones throughout the year. You have 24 months to do that, not 12 months. And you could do that through tracking performance metrics, which is what I'm going to go into next. In addition, with this multi-year budget, you could have better control over, departmental overspending. And this also incentivizes, savings and also watching out for these liability claims because you have more time. And so what this does is you're repurposing the time spent on the current annual budget process to focus on measuring and improving performance and results if you were to go to a 2-year. And so this is performance-based budgeting. And the city tried to move towards this 10 years ago, and then I don't know what happened. It just died. But that's like a lot of things in the city. We have these goals and no one sticks to it. So performance-based budgeting, these identify specific results, that you want, the community or elected officials, and you prioritize your spending to achieve those results. You're measuring your spending and your budget according to your performance. Right now, the city doesn't do a great job at doing that. And that's why a lot of people complain. That's why a lot of people say, where are my tax dollars going? So departments and policymakers, they could set the metrics and the goals to measure every program's effectiveness with this. And they must be tracked, reported, and evaluated on a real-time basis. I would say monthly, if possible, but if not, quarterly. And this could also offer, because you have that performance data, objective data that can be used for future budgeting and program development. And it also fosters a culture of innovation, improvement, and also transparency and accountability when you know how your department's doing on a more real-time basis. And so these are just some examples of what we're building right now in our office. We're building a citywide dashboard where you could track every department's not only their spending, but also their performance metrics on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis. And so here's an example on the left side. On the left side is an example of the sanitation department. So one of their metrics is how many bulky items am I picking up? And you can see here that it's broken out by July, August, September. So you could just see how things are going. And if you were a taxpayer or you were an elected official, you could ask the department, how come August is lower? Like, did we just, maybe they could say, a lot of our staff got laid off in July or something, like it will give you the opportunity to ask questions as to where are my things going. If you look on the right side, that is street services. So that's another example. It shows you how many potholes they repaired in terms of square footage. And so you could just see, and if you were reading this, you could ask, how come it jumped from August to September so high, right? So if you have these metrics, performance-based budgeting, you can start to answer the questions, where did my tax dollars go each month? And then you could show them this. And then you can evaluate your budget in real time, or change your spending priorities if you need to. If you don't think anything's working out, then it's like, maybe we gotta cut it, right? And so the third thing and the last thing is participatory budgeting. And we actually, as Dr. Tabatha mentioned, we created an app that actually uses the city's budget, like real numbers, where you can actually go in there and you can go in there and you can actually change it using technology, using data. You could just click an arrow and you could show, where do you want your money to go? So these numbers are real numbers. This is how much we currently invest in terms of the operating budget. This doesn't include like the pensions and everything, but this is more salaries, expenses, and other things. And so you could actually go in here and you can create your budget the way you want it. And then after you're done with creating your own budget, you could then submit it to your council member. So we created this. This is actually live. We've had so many people use it. But the point of participatory budgeting, and as mentioned in the prior presentation, is there are so many benefits, right? Greater community understanding of budget and fiscal realities, including the necessity of trade-offs, strengthens government-community relationships, mutual trust, provides greater transparency and accountability over what's happening now, and then also promotes equity by lessening power of the status quo and encouraging greater attention to disinvest in neighborhoods and programs. What you'll hear from other elected officials is they'll say, well, you voted for me, so I can make the decision for what your budget is going to be. And for me, I don't think that's a good way to govern or think. Just because, and by the way, there's like over 250,000 people in the council district, and what you'll see is turnout is so low. So if 10,000 people voted for that council member, and then they're like, 10,000 voted for me, so I get to make the decisions. Participatory budgeting is the check on that. If people want to take that for 4 years, because that's how long they're going to be in office, this could be a check to be like, well, hold on. Just because you got elected, the people should still have a say. And so we believe that this is a good thing to have, right? And these are some of the results that we've seen here so far. You can see people want more housing, more money for planning, for streetlights. It's a big bar chart, so I can't include everything. More funds for animal services, the controller, things like that. Information technology. It's like if you scroll up, it's a bigger one. Yeah. But it's on our website. Check our website. Yeah, it takes up like 3 pages. And so, to wrap up all these three, multi-year budgeting, performance-based budgeting, and participatory budgeting, we need structural reform. And if you change the budget format, you're going to change the culture in City Hall. And if you do that through the charter, then people cannot wiggle their way out of it, which is what I feel like the city does. They try to get by, sadly sometimes like hit the checkbox or sometimes the bare minimum. And this is actually going to force the city's hand to be more cognizant and intentional in how they budget. So as you mentioned, better long-term planning through multi-year budgets, capital infrastructure plans, greater transparency and accountability through performance-based budgeting, and expanded public participation through participatory budgeting. The charter does not have to be changed. I mentioned this earlier to change the way the city budgets. But like I said, if you memorialize it, it would give legitimacy and prevent future policymakers from backtracking. So specifically where this would go in the city charter is under the general budget section, under section 310. So that is where we can actually put language in to change that budget if we wanted to incorporate that. And so overall, as your city controller, these are things that I've mentioned just to get the city on better financial track. I believe we do need a chief financial officer. There's no one overseeing the city's fiscal health. I mean, we're doing our best, but we have no staff to do it. We've been advocating for a 2-year budget, capital infrastructure plan, more honest and transparent budgeting, right? Accountability for overspending, performance-based budgeting, and empowering department heads to budget for the results that everyone needs. So this is more high level on how I feel that the city could get to better strategic health, because the last 2-3 years we've been in a budget deficit, and we still are. And we could change that. We could change that through this process. And so yeah, that's all I had. I finished right before 20, so I'll take any questions. Commissioner Field.
Thank you. This is really, really interesting. Thank you. And let's say I am interested in a multi-year budget process for all the good reasons. What I'm not clear on is how frequent the revenue sources are available. I mean, for example, the state budget, you know, they kind of know April 15th is like the huge day, right? State income tax. And then they pick up their share of sales tax and so on. So I'm just so unclear on the revenue sources and when or how frequently. And the reason I'm asking is because if you plan for 2 years, and I know you want to be realistic about expenses as well as revenue, how can you accurately project revenue?
That's a good question. So currently the way the city budget process is my office actually by charter has to release a revenue forecast in March. So we actually know, if you see these revenue sources here, we know when each one comes in.
Okay.
So because of that ability to financially plan and forecast better, which my office has been more accurate than, you know, the CAO or, you know, the adopted budget, we can better plan as to what's going to come in revenue. So I'll give you an example, Commissioner Field. We actually forecasted that revenue would be a lot lower than what the city adopted in the final budget, and we were right. We were actually $200 million short, $100 million short, and that was catastrophic because in the city where you have less revenues, but you're still spending as planned, you have a gap, a deficit. And what ended up happening, we had to take money away from elsewhere. So this multi-year budget will allow us to be more realistic and better with that because we're constantly reassessing, we're constantly seeing when revenues come in on a monthly basis, and we know when each one comes in.
And just, if I may follow up.
Sure.
I know Commissioner Tom has to get going. And what about the circumstance, suddenly, for example, COVID?
Right.
All of a sudden, whatever your projections had been have to change quick. How would that be handled if, say, you were in the, you know, second year or something?
Yeah. I think multi-year budget actually does better for these unsuspected shocks, COVID or something happening that's out of our control, because when you have a multi-year budget, you're allowed to readjust within it. Right now in the city, when something like that happens, it's very dramatic and disruptive. And when it does happen, you start furloughs, you start laying off people, because you're operating within such a, oh my God, I only have 7 months left and I budgeted this amount, because you're so constrained in that that 12-month period. If you have a 24-month period, you could actually adjust for anything that happens, you know, much better than being super fast about it.
Thank you.
So you mentioned, this is great, by the way. I'm sure when you walked up, I'm sure there's had to be somebody in the room like, what's this kid doing here?
Now, ageism.
No.
I take it as a compliment.
No, it's a compliment. No, he knows it's a compliment.
I just turned 25, so I'm just kidding.
No, but I think, but I will say, I'm just blown away by, you know, the work that you've done, by the thoughtfulness that you've had, and I think, I also think that your work is reflective in your being grounded in community. You know, and I think that needs to be said, is that, you know, when people occupy government spaces who are grounded in community, these are the kinds of outcomes and these are the kinds of proposals that you see that actually make sense. And so I have asked this question to folks. What disturbs me, I've heard that they don't call them police brutality bonds in the city. But police brutality bonds are a thing. And this would be, I think, the liability that happens, that the city takes on as a result of police misconduct. In others, but they are actually being traded on Wall Street. And so there is no real push. I mean, rich people are getting richer every time a black or brown body dies in the street as a result of police misconduct and police murder. And so there has to be, if doctors are necessary, and I think doctors are probably more necessary than police. Then doctors have to have insurance, malpractice insurance. It's very expensive. And I just don't understand. Number one, the police budget is always the largest. And I'm gonna quote Pete White too, it's recession proof, right? It's recession proof. When you look at effectiveness, it's abysmal in terms of how effective they are in keeping us safe. Why is there a conversation trying to absolve the city of the responsibility for police who are committing misconduct? And I mean, this is something that is common. I mean, you know, even in fraternities and sororities and universities, everybody's trying to erase their liability except the city with regards to police. And so I'm just trying to, I mean, I don't know if that's an appropriate question, you know, or what, but, you know, I just, are these conversations taking place? And what could be done with the money, with the savings, if the city wasn't liable for police misconduct?
Yeah, that's answer your second question and first, because that was the latest one. But a lot of money could be spent if we didn't spend a lot on police liability claims. If you didn't know, liability claims, police make up the largest share by a long shot, and it's a lot. It's a lot of money. Over the past 6 years, it's like $400 million. And so when you ask, well, could we have spent it on? Yeah, you can, because that money is actually not attributed to this budget here. It's actually on top of this. Yeah. And it takes away from the general fund. And so, you know, so yes, you could spend it on anything else. And that's sort of what is happening these past 2 fiscal years, where the opposite happened. Because of so many liability claims, we actually had to defund every other department because we had to pay for these.
Did you say defund?
Yeah, I said, we got to reclaim that word. Defund. The city is defunding other departments, you know? They're defunding other departments. That's just how it is. And so to your first question though is, you know, is the city having a conversation about this? And I'll be honest, like, no. You know, at least not in a transparent manner. Because I'm the accountant, I track these liability claims. I see it all the time. It comes to my office. I have to put my signature on every payment. And when I ask, like, what are we doing? Like, nothing's happening. So my office is actually doing an audit on City Hall right now on these liability claims. Like, what is the strategy to reduce harm and liabilities and these payments, right? So that's what I know what I'm doing. My part of the city is doing. We're auditing City Hall to find out. But I think this is where, either in the charter, and I've recommended this to other elected officials, if you want to put in some language, whether it's in the charter or something where it says, if these liability claims are totally preventable, and it was, you know, tack on a percentage to that liability claim. So if you owe someone $10 million because you ran over somebody, preventable. Maybe you don't want to do the full 100% on 10 million because you'll bankrupt, you know, whatever, a small department or something, right? But maybe do a small percentage. So that way departments feel it. And I feel that right now departments don't feel it. They don't feel that their liabilities are hurting other taxpayers when they take that money away from them. So that's something that, you know, I offered as a solution to other electeds. You know, no one has moved on it, but start off small. And maybe you do that through the charter, maybe you don't. Maybe you only do it for public safety related, or you do it for, you know, infrastructure, whatever. But the point is that let departments feel that accountability because they'll feel it in their budget. So that's what I'm doing as City Hall for this thing. So, Commissioner Mack.
Yeah, and I have a quick question shifting over to multi-year budget, and this is more of a half-baked question, and
Sure.
so bear with me. I think it's something I'm curious about. And so I was thinking, and if you have any initial thoughts, if we were to move to a multi-year budget, my understanding is that we get money from the state, and they operate on a 1-year, I think, cycle. How would that kind of interaction play out if we were to move to, let's say, a 2-year?
Yeah, I think it would be similar to us knowing when the money comes in. And I think when that money comes in from the state, it usually comes in as a grant, or it comes in with like, if I give you this money, you have to track it. So I think it as long as the city is using the state money or the state grants for the purpose that it's used for, I don't think, whether it's a 1-year or 2-year budget, it will change. As long as it's tracked to make sure. Right, exactly. And that's the one thing that they're very strict about, is if you get grant money from the feds or the state, they just want to make sure it's being used before the deadline, or if it's being used on the right thing.
I was just curious if it poses any, at the moment, obstacles that you can think of. And the Commissioner Field?
Okay. I'm looking at the slide, real-time performance tracking, and I think you said you're building that, right?
Yeah, we actually have a website, yeah.
Okay. Who provides the data?
Great question.
Each department?
Actually have some city employees here, but they provide it. Each department provides it. So it's twofold. It's performance metrics that the department tracks, and then as the independent accountant or auditor, I can request separate metrics, because maybe some departments only want to show the good stuff. So, but as your independent watchdog, I'd be like, hey, show me the metrics for this thing too. Okay. So that currently it's departments giving it.
And when you say it's being built, is every department currently involved, or just a few?
85%. So right now we've done like over 30 departments, and we're moving towards like the last couple. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
So there's a lot.
I have a question regarding performance tracking and performance-based budgeting as opposed to baseline. What about the unions?
For performance-based budgeting?
Yeah, sometimes there's a little reluctance among certain labor organizations to have employees tracked in this way. I would hope not, but.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume that they're okay with, seeing how they're doing, and but I didn't think about that.
So, but if you haven't heard from them, you're probably okay.
But I talk to them. I talk to people.
Okay. Oh, good.
All the city employees are union workers.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
All right.
Really appreciate you coming out here today.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Alrighty, we're gonna queue up our last presenters. If you just give us a couple minutes. Oh, there it is. Oh, perfect. Okay. Okay. Sure. Okay, perfect. Okay, so you know, so post on the website. Okay. Oh my God, did you come out?
And we still were I have some comments on it's just the two of
I guess I can still.
Last one.
I know.
And we'll be quick.
Are you exempt or emergency? How did you get hired?
I'm exempt.
You're exempt?
Yeah.
I was just curious when I learned the difference.
Yeah.
Oh, there they are. How lovely. Please be sure to
We found.
No, we didn't get anything in advance.
No, I, my bad. I was gonna give it to you, but I'm gonna send it, to them.
Oh, yeah. It'll get in the record somehow. Are you missing?
We are, we're missing one speaker. But it'll be faster for you.
Okay, that should be good. Okay.
Should we talk from there?
Oh, no, that's perfect.
Okay. I'm gonna introduce Sam Gordon from TechEquity. What we're talking about
is a little bit more about the impact of artificial intelligence and new technologies on the city. What we're actually proposing is a pretty mild first step, but we want to set a little context. We were able to do this in November. Some of you were here. Set a little context for why we're concerned and why we think we need more guardrails, and then talk a little bit about the sort of first step we think that can be taken within the charter. And then, you know, we also feel like legislatively there's going to be a bunch of work to do, but we think there is a first step that we can embed in the charter that would be very useful, which I'll explain. But first I'm going to introduce Sam Gordon from TechEquity.
Hi, nice to meet you all. Good morning. Thank you for or good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. It's been a long day. My name is Samantha Gordon. I'm with TechEquity. I'm our Chief Advocacy Officer. We are a nonprofit based here in California, and our mission is to raise public consciousness about economic equity issues and that result from the tech industry's products and practices, and advocate for change to ensure that the growth of the industry and new technology can benefit everyone. So as Roxana mentioned, we're here to talk about AI. AI's use has been growing, obviously, throughout the public sector. Many jurisdictions and states, including California, have been purchasing AI systems to power things like unemployment insurance reviews, assessment and permitting, and as you all probably know, was reported by the city in October that Los Angeles is giving access to workers to use generative AI tools as part of their Google suite of products. And there have been, you know, guidance documents and different things outlined, like coalitions like GovAI, and some procurement guidelines, issued here in Los Angeles as well as in the state of California. But there are very few actual requirements. And at the same time, we're seeing an unprecedented investment in this technology, both via the private and the public sector. And there are fears growing that an AI bubble has formed where many people believe the level of investment is far beyond the actual value that the technology will return. There was a recent study published out of MIT that found that 95% of AI pilots in the private sector have failed. And importantly, it noted that only 5% of custom generative AI tools survive the, quote, pilot to production cliff, while generic chatbots hit 83% adoption for trivial tasks. They stall out the moment workflows demand context and customization. So I note this to you all because, as you all know, as a city and the public sector, it really demands context and customization for the complexity of the issues that you serve. So it's imperative prior to adoption that tools are developed with the people who deliver services, the workforce, and the people who are going to be impacted by them, so that they can be, you know, conscious of the context, the anomalies, the needs of the population that the city is required to serve, and that there's an opportunity to co-create solutions that are going to be beneficial to the public and not harmful. And so why are we talking to you about this today? It's important to note that the target customer for most of this technology is the government. You are the market that they would like to be purchasing their products. And so there is a massive funded operation to market and sell these technologies across a suite of services, everything having to do with healthcare, education, public benefits. And the difference between, obviously, a city or the public sector and the private sector is that the stakes are so much higher, right? Both financially, but also for the communities you serve. People are coming to you in their most vulnerable moments and asking for support. And in the public sector, we cannot afford a 95% failure rate. That might be okay in the private sector. It's not going to fly in the public. And already we've seen examples where this technology has gone awry within the public sector. So here in California, I think all of us are familiar that, you know, millions of people struggled to receive unemployment insurance during the pandemic. Something that was underreported as the headlines were focused on fraud. In February of 2022, a legislative analyst's office report outlined that hundreds of thousands of workers' claims were wrongfully denied due to an AI system. So in December of 2020, the Employment Development Department contracted with a company that was offering a fraud detection algorithm. That algorithm reviewed almost 10 million claims filed during the pandemic. They identified 1.1 million claims as fraudulent. EDD immediately stopped those payments for those claims, and the impacted workers were not notified ahead of time, right? So their money was just cut in December 2020. However, 600,000 of that 1.1 million of those claims that were denied were later confirmed as legitimate claims. This experience was not isolated to California. This same algorithm has been sold to 42 states and was the subject of a complaint at the Federal Trade Commission. So 600,000 people in California lost their money before Christmas, December 2020, because an algorithm had a 50% error rate and was deployed in the public sector. Recently, New York City introduced an AI-powered chatbot meant to provide residents with information about starting and operating a business in the city. Within 5 months, it was found that the chatbot repeatedly provided advice to the public to explicitly break the law. Questions like, can I take a cut of my workers' tips, would get an answer from the bot that said, yes, you can take a cut of your workers' tips, with an explanation that made this practice sound confusing but legal, when in fact, employers, hopefully everyone knows, are barred from taking their workers' tips in New York City. Or questions about housing like, do landlords have to accept tenants on rental assistance, with the chatbot responding, no, landlords are not required to accept tenants on rental assistance, which is in direct violation of a law that says landlords cannot discriminate based on the source of income. That's also true here. What distinguishes the public sector from the private actors who develop and sell this technology is that the public sector is responsible for providing services to everyone and ensuring that those services are safe and not going to further harm in our lives. Our communities who count on their local governments in some of the most difficult moments in their lives cannot be used as market research or experiments. So we encourage you, as you think through the charter and the future of Los Angeles, that you establish not only a clear vision for how the city will engage its residents and workers in building technology that serves its people, but that you adopt standards to center those same people in the development, design, deployment, and oversight of this technology. Thank you.
I think in many ways we have a lot of the same arguments as the previous speakers, that this kind of thing AI should not be deployed unless the people who are going to experience its impacts have a voice in how it's used within the city. So I'm Roxana Tynan. I'm with the Los Angeles Alliance for a New Economy. And we're working with an early stage coalition of community organizations and unions who are really concerned. And we all feel like we're playing catch up, right? The tech bros are way out ahead of us, and we have to race to catch up to ensure there are real protections for real humans in the face of this new tech. Sam gave a few examples. There are unfortunately so many terrible examples. I mean, ShotSpotter is one example that's been used in New York and Chicago, where they place microphones in communities they think are at high risk of gunfire. Then the cops go out when the AI tells them there's been a gunshot. And in New York, it was wrong more than 80% of the time. And that meant that cops were running into potentially vulnerable neighborhoods thinking that they were dealing with gun crime. And you can imagine, there are so many things that can go wrong, not to mention it's just a terrible waste of money and resources. So given that, our city information technology agency does actually have a digital code of ethics that provides some good guidelines. I think we need more, but provides some good guidelines for the city. But they do not have the force of law. They are not requirements. They are guidelines around principles that the Information Technology Agency lays out, which are about this needs to be human-centric, the people impacted by this tech need to have a voice in how it's used. There needs to be transparency, people being able to understand what is the city buying, having like clear language that non-tech people can understand about what its impacts are. Ensuring also that there's equity in the kinds of expenditures that are made around AI. So while those guidelines are a really good beginning, they are insufficient. And so we want to take the first step in the charter, which is to look at some of this, at the contracting, section 370 of the charter, and to add some additional notification requirements that would first, before the city does an RFP or an RFQ, would ask a whole set of questions, many of which the ITA uses voluntarily, but would ask a whole set of questions about, first of all, why do you need this AI? Second of all, do we have protections against it taking the place of actual humans in the city who do this work? Will there be human oversight of it? What was the data upon which the AI learned? Unfortunately, it's not the exception that AI, it has biased and discriminatory outcomes. Right now, it is unfortunately the rule that those are the outcomes. And so what was the data used? How was it developed? What's the oversight? Has it been evaluated? So a set of questions built into the contracting process, and then a requirement that all that information be posted publicly so that in understandable language, so that folks can weigh in and have a voice on how we're spending our money and what kind of tech we're using and what its impacts are. So this is a basic transparency measure. There are many more steps that we want to take with our city council, but we feel like within the part of the charter that deals with contracting and procurement, that we can add these steps that our agency is, doing voluntarily, but ensure that these are permanently required moving forward. And so we will send the language over to the commission staff and make sure you guys get it. But we can take any questions.
Start with Commissioner Thomas and then Commissioner.
I think this is great. We are having a lot of discussions at the university about AI. And one of the things that concerns me is the utilization of AI in law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
That is very concerning. And I don't know if this is true, but I've heard that even merchants are AI is being connected to facial recognition and able to gather information on people who actually just come into the store and don't even know that they're being observed that deeply. And so I think it's very important that the city gets a handle on this. Very, very important.
It's our strong belief that facial recognition should be banned outright. It's a failed tech and it's only used to harm people in our experience. So we believe in an outright ban. To be quite frank, I think we're going to have a much bigger fight that might take longer than the charter reform process around that. Our leadership on council is currently working to try and set some more guardrails around the automatic license plate readers that the LAPD uses, which are also really problematic. And we want to prevent, certainly the LAPD, from having a contract with Flock, one of the companies that takes that automatic license plate reader data and has shared it with ICE and other federal agencies. So, lots of concerns there for sure. So we're suggesting a pretty first step to just notification and transparency that then we need to follow up as a city with a lot more regulation.
Commissioner Field?
Yeah, thank you. I have to admit, initially, I was thinking, I agree with most of this, but why is it the charter? So now you've explained. Let me see. I just want to be sure I understand.
Mm-hmm.
You know which section of the charter. You're going to prepare language that is sort of charterese, special lingo, right?
It's a clinical term, charter.
Yeah, okay. And in this process, are you engaging with the labor unions of the city? I mean, who else are you connecting with so that this isn't coming from, both of you very legitimate, obviously. LAANE, of course, long history in our city. But,
yes.
Who's on board or who's connecting or learning or thinking about this?
It is an early coalition, but so far our primary union partners are SEIU 721. We have the Engineers and Architects EAA in the room who have been engaged, the Food and Commercial Workers Union, Unite Here, and the USWW, the janitors and the security officers. So there are many more unions who care deeply about this issue and who we think we will quite easily be able to recruit, and then our LA Federation of Labor and State Federation of Labor. And on the community side, we've talked primarily to our immigrant rights allies and have just started with the EFF, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, ACLU, but there are many, many more people to organize. We are playing our own game of catch up. And we come to this because we do direct organizing with retail workers. And their experience, I mean, what really brought this to our attention as kind of, at least I'm not the most tech person in the world, was our retail workers, particularly non-union retail workers, talking about the kind, I mean, we want a scheduling ordinance, but we have to fight to enforce it, talking about the kind of surveillance they deal with at work, and the kind of surveillance that's all about speed up, right? You gotta check that you've done this job at this time, and you get dinged if you're perceived to be moving too slowly, whether it's restocking the shelves or, so our entrance to this comes from those retail workers.
I was just gonna say, ultimately, whatever the commission recommends, the council has the final say, and then the voters. So obviously, if you're wanting this to happen, big coalition, right? Yeah, okay, thanks.
Definitely.
And I'm gonna have to run because I'm supposed to be at another place at another meeting at 5:30. I hope you're the last one.
We are the
They
last.
are.
We're
Two
the
more,
last.
two more.
No!
I'm kidding.
No way.
So I would say, don't not put it in because you think it won't be accepted. Like, don't scale it back. We need to know what needs to be done, whatever it is. You know what I mean?
Right. I mean,
So-
we have like 3 pieces of legislation and potentially more. I mean, what we want to do is take some legislation the State Federation of Labor ran for worker focused, right, around no spying bosses, no robot bosses, and pass that locally. I don't think that we can get that in the charter. I feel like we can win it, but I'm not sure that we can get it in this process. But maybe I'm being too conservative.
Don't be conservative.
Okay.
Don't be conservative. Because there's there is this process, right? And if this process is done right, then it gets out to the community. And then the community can then demand, wait a minute.
Right.
Why isn't this? Because the information that you're sharing, most people don't know this is happening.
Right.
They have no clue. They have no clue. And so, so I would say, I would just, you can put an asterisk, say, maybe impossible.
we never mind being told to do more.
Yeah. And so, the other thing that I was going to say too is that what are recommendations for potential consequences for people who violate it?
Yeah.
Because that's, and I think that, that becomes a really big thing because it's like, it's like these marijuana dispensaries. Well, it's so lucrative until they have to shut down, they pay the fine, and then just open someplace else and then they do it again over and over and over. So, these businesses that are making a lot of money can say, well, it's politically expedient for me to just continue to do it, and then I'll just pay whatever or do whatever,
Right.
And so I think it's important to kind of look at that issue too, because we're looking at the government, we're looking at private sector primarily, and so I think it's very, very important that there is an accountability metrics considered and put in that.
Absolutely.
I was just gonna say, I do a lot of work on state policy as well, and most of the penalties that are assigned when you're talking about the developers of the technology, it's budget dust for them, right? Like these are the most profitable, most highly valued companies in the history of the world. And so I think the penalty piece is important. And I would say, as you're thinking through procurement and budgeting for the city, it's also really important that the city avoids a lot of the contractual traps that we've seen of yesteryear where there's massive lock-in features because, like I said, the market, especially for sort of mid-level tech that is using these larger systems, is cities, counties, and state government. So they're hoping to sign contracts that lock you into the technology. Many of the large developers will give you that tech for free. First hit is free, and then you will be stuck with it. So I think that's part of the reason that I feel really strongly it's important to be considered in a budgeting conversation as well.
Well, we're looking forward to seeing the materials that you share with our
Yes.
staff. But that said, thank you so much for speaking to us and waiting to the end.
Thank you so much.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? Chair second? All right, seeing no objections, this meeting is adjourned at 5:16. Thank you all for coming out today.
I'll just note, I think Commissioner Thomas arrived, at the roll call, and then I think Commissioner, you,
I was here
Oh, you-
when we started.
but at the new second roll call, you arrived 5 minutes later. For the record.
Right.
Thank you.
I didn't know you did another roll.
It was the water break.
Yes.